The city of Dubai rises like a mirage from the golden sands, a world of glass towers reflecting the fading sun, and streets that shimmer with the glow of countless lights. From above, it appears flawless, a carefully constructed oasis of wealth and ambition, where luxury cars glide silently over smooth roads, and skyscrapers reach like fingers into the clouds. But beneath this glittering surface, under the quiet hum of prosperity, there exists another world, a shadowy kingdom, hidden in plain sight. A world ruled not by the neon glow of shopping malls or the sparkle of yachts, but by whispers, clandestine meetings, and fortunes that were never meant to be seen. The streets, busy with tourists and businesspeople during the day, hide secrets that most would never imagine. And as the night settles over the city, a calm darkness spreads, carrying with it an almost imperceptible tension. It is in this quiet, in these moments when the city exhales, that the underworld breathes most freely. The desert surrounds Dubai like a silent guardian, its endless dunes a place of both serenity and concealment. By day, the sun casts long shadows over sand and stone, creating patterns that shift with every gust of wind. By night, the temperature drops, and the desert takes on a different life, the stars blaze like distant fires, and the quiet is absolute, broken only by the occasional whisper of movement. Here, the powerful of the underworld sometimes retreat, far from the prying eyes of authorities and rivals alike. They meet in abandoned villas, in the shadow of factories, or in the vast, uninhabited stretches beyond the city, where only the wind and the desert know the truth. Even in this barren calm, there is an underlying rhythm, a pulse that hints at secrets larger than the city itself, and fortunes built upon silence and discretion. In the glittering streets, the apparent peace of Dubai is meticulously maintained. Luxury hotels, designer boutiques, and five-star restaurants all carry an air of exclusivity, elegance, and refinement. Yet for every polished lobby, there exists a back door, a shadowed corridor, or a private elevator that few ever see. Behind these doors, deals are struck with precision, fortunes are moved without trace, and influence is wielded quietly but effectively. The billionaires of this hidden world operate with a different code, one that demands discretion, patience, and unwavering control. Their methods are as calculated as the architecture that towers above them, built to withstand scrutiny yet remain untouchable to those who lack insight or opportunity. The people who populate this hidden kingdom are not easily recognized. They wear suits as sleek as the vehicles they drive, they speak with the polish of educated elites, and their presence can go unnoticed even in the most crowded venues. They blend seamlessly into the world of legitimate business, investing in real estate, importing luxury goods, or running seemingly innocuous companies. Yet every decision they make is a thread in a much larger web, connecting them to networks that span continents. Dubai, with its rapid development and global connections, becomes both a stage and a shield. To the outsider, it seems like a city of progress and opportunity. To those in the know, it is a chessboard, where moves are measured, stakes are high, and a single misstep can erase years of carefully cultivated power. It is not only wealth that defines this shadowy realm, but also the subtle mastery of perception. Reputation is cultivated with the same care as financial portfolios. Rumors, carefully placed stories, and strategic appearances all serve to reinforce an image, one of invincibility, influence, and mystery. A glance exchanged in a private club, a meeting in a seemingly innocuous office, a cryptic phone call at night, these moments carry more weight than any public act. The true power of the underworld is in its invisibility, in its ability to shape events and control outcomes without ever being directly seen. Dubai itself becomes a character in this story, a city that dazzles the eyes while hiding the depths of ambition, danger, and secrecy that lurk just below the surface. And yet, there is a strange poetry in this hidden world, a rhythm that is both terrifying and mesmerizing. The nights are calm, almost hypnotic, with the soft glow of streetlights and the distant hum of traffic blending with the wind that sweeps over the city and the desert alike. Meetings are conducted in hushed tones, deals are finalized with subtle nods and slight gestures, and fortunes are transferred without a signature ever touching a ledger. There is a precision to it, an elegance in the quiet mastery of control. The city sleeps, unaware of the silent forces shaping its fortunes, while the underworld continues its delicate dance, moving invisibly through the cracks of opulence and legality. It is in this space between light and shadow, between the glittering skyline and the endless dunes, that the story begins. The story of a world where billions circulate quietly, power is measured in subtle influence rather than overt violence, and every decision can ripple across continents. A world where ambition meets secrecy, and where the most powerful figures remain ghosts in plain sight. This is the Dubai Mafia, not loud, not overt, but precise, calculated, and mesmerizing in its scale and sophistication. And as we begin this journey, the listener is invited to enter this calm yet suspenseful realm, to wander through streets bathed in light and shadow, to witness the hidden currents that drive one of the most fascinating underworlds the modern world has ever seen. The city sleeps, but the story does not. The story of the Dubai underworld begins not in palaces or boardrooms, but in far humbler places, small apartments tucked into busy neighborhoods, narrow alleyways echoing with the sounds of daily life, and markets where the aroma of spices mingled with the dust of the desert. The key figures who would rise to power in this hidden kingdom were often children of modest means, born into families whose daily existence revolved around survival, labor, and the occasional glimmer of opportunity. These early years were shaped by routine and repetition, yet also by the subtle lessons of observation, how influence could be wielded through charm, how fear could be measured in gestures, and how the world often rewarded those willing to take risks others avoided. In these formative moments, the seeds of ambition were quietly planted, often without the knowledge of those who would later wield immense power. Life in these neighborhoods carried a rhythm both ordinary and instructive. Children played on sun-baked streets, chasing stray cats or rolling cans, while adults negotiated trades, bartered goods, or shared stories that carried moral weight alongside entertainment. The lessons were never formal, but they were clear. Opportunity existed for those willing to understand the currents of society, for those who could read intentions hidden behind smiles or polite conversation. For many of the future figures in Dubai's Mafia, this was the classroom in which they learned strategy, observation, and timing. Even the simple act of watching who received respect and who was ignored became a guide to understanding power. These early streets, full of life and small struggles, quietly shaped minds attuned to the subtleties of influence and survival. As they grew, these children became more aware of the disparities around them. The city's skyline was beginning to shift, with towering cranes and half-finished skyscrapers hinting at the wealth that was just beginning to flow into Dubai. Some families prospered, while others struggled to keep pace, and those who could see opportunity often took paths that others considered unconventional, even dangerous. Early interactions with small-scale crime, whether petty theft, smuggling, or underground trading, offered lessons in risk, reward, and discretion. These were not reckless endeavors, but carefully measured steps, each one teaching the importance of timing, loyalty, and the consequences of failure. With each small success, ambition grew quietly, almost imperceptibly, until it became a guiding force. Mentors and influential figures also began to play a role. Older, more experienced individuals who had already navigated the hidden channels of commerce, smuggling, and negotiation provided guidance, sometimes intentionally, sometimes by example. They taught subtlety, patience, and the art of persuasion, emphasizing that true power was rarely displayed openly. In quiet cafes, back rooms, or behind the facades of legitimate businesses, lessons were imparted through stories, cautionary tales, and small tests. The young aspirants learned to listen more than they spoke, to watch the reactions of others, and to measure every action against long-term outcomes. These early experiences forged the intellect, resilience, and strategic thinking necessary to thrive in the larger world that awaited. Education, both formal and informal, played an unusual role. Some families insisted on schooling, seeing it as a bridge to social mobility, while others valued practical skills over classroom learning. For those who would later navigate the Dubai underworld, knowledge of finance, law, and international trade became quietly essential. Even a casual understanding of currency exchange, real estate trends, or import-export regulations could later provide a crucial advantage. While some of this knowledge came from books and formal education, much was absorbed through observation, conversation, and careful study of how others conducted themselves in business and politics. This combination of streetwise cunning and practical intellect became the foundation upon which greater ambitions were built. Family dynamics were equally influential. Many of these young individuals grew up in extended households where multiple generations coexisted, creating networks of obligation, loyalty, and sometimes quiet tension. They learned to navigate relationships, negotiate alliances, and identify subtle hierarchies within their own homes before ever confronting the wider world. In some cases, siblings and cousins became early partners in ventures that skirted legality, testing loyalty and judgment in controlled ways. Parents, often unaware of the full extent of these activities, instilled a work ethic and awareness of societal expectations that later guided decisions in both the legal and illicit spheres. This interplay between familial influence and emerging ambition created a nuanced understanding of responsibility, trust, and risk that would prove invaluable in later years. The broader city itself also became a teacher. Markets teeming with merchants from around the world, the rise of construction projects that drew laborers and investors alike, and the sudden influx of international business offered endless lessons in human behavior, commerce, and opportunity. Observing how wealth flowed, who wielded influence, and how deals were struck taught these future figures to read patterns and anticipate outcomes. Even the smallest details, a merchant's hesitation, a banker's preference, a client's unspoken expectation, became data points in a growing mental map of opportunity and risk. By adulthood, these individuals possessed a rare combination of streetwise instinct and strategic foresight, honed in the crucible of ordinary life but prepared for extraordinary ventures. By the time ambition fully awakened, the city itself was ready to provide pathways. The rapid expansion of Dubai's infrastructure, the introduction of international finance, and the lure of untapped markets created a landscape where daring, intelligence, and discretion could yield enormous rewards. Early experiments in small-scale trade and clandestine ventures became a training ground, testing limits, patience, and judgment. These initial successes, though modest, offered a sense of possibility, a quiet affirmation that power, wealth, and influence were attainable if one could navigate the complexities of both society and the shadows. The city, with all its light and allure, became both playground and proving ground. And so, the journey of these figures begins not with headlines or notoriety, but with the quiet accumulation of knowledge, skill, and ambition. It is a story of humble roots, careful observation, and early lessons that shape character and destiny. The streets of Dubai, once dusty and unassuming, hold the whispers of these formative years, where dreams first take shape and plans begin to unfurl. The seemingly ordinary world of family, school, and neighborhood conceals the beginnings of extraordinary influence. In the calm, reflective spaces of markets, alleys, and modest homes, a future empire silently germinates, waiting for the right moment to rise, ambitious, quiet, and unrelenting, beneath the ever-watchful skyline. The first steps into the world of crime are often subtle, almost invisible, like footprints pressed lightly into sand. For the young figures of Dubai's hidden underworld, these early ventures began not with violence or grand heists, but with small acts of daring and calculated risk. A shipment quietly rerouted, a deal struck in the shadows of a busy marketplace, a small sum of money exchanged under the table, these were the lessons of the initial forays into illicit activity. At first, the stakes were modest, and the reward small, but each success brought confidence, each failure offered insight, and each observation deepened their understanding of how to navigate a world where legality and illegality intersected in subtle, sometimes invisible ways. The city itself provided an intricate classroom. Narrow alleyways and bustling docks became theaters of experimentation, where intelligence, patience, and perception were tested. Observing the flow of goods, the behavior of merchants, and the patterns of local enforcement taught lessons far beyond what books could offer. A misplaced shipment could draw unwanted attention, while a carefully timed transaction could pass unnoticed by those with authority. Every success, no matter how small, reinforced the notion that discretion and timing were as valuable as courage or strength. And in these moments, the young aspirants began to understand the first rule of the underworld: power was as much about remaining unseen as it was about taking action. Early encounters with mentors and local figures further shaped these formative experiences. Older individuals who had already navigated the complex intersections of business, politics, and underground networks offered guidance in subtle ways. Some imparted wisdom directly, teaching the importance of patience, loyalty, and observation, while others provided lessons through example, their successes and failures acting as quiet instruction. These early lessons often came wrapped in everyday scenarios: a negotiation over a shipment, a dispute in a market, or a misunderstanding with a local official. Each situation tested judgment, composure, and creativity, and every decision contributed to a growing sense of capability and awareness. Risk became a constant companion. The young operators learned quickly that mistakes carried consequences far beyond embarrassment or financial loss. A miscalculation could mean scrutiny from authorities, resentment from peers, or betrayal by a trusted associate. Even small errors were instructive, teaching the importance of reading situations carefully, anticipating reactions, and planning several steps ahead. In many ways, the early criminal endeavors were like training grounds for the larger operations to come. They were exercises in strategy, psychology, and self-control. Every decision became a thread in a larger tapestry, each choice a reflection of character and foresight. As experience grew, so did ambition. Small ventures evolved into more complex schemes, moving beyond the confines of neighborhoods into larger markets, trade networks, and even cross-border transactions. Discreet smuggling of goods, minor financial manipulations, and subtle exploitation of loopholes offered both wealth and the opportunity to expand influence. Each new venture carried heightened stakes, but also greater rewards, reinforcing the connection between courage, intelligence, and discretion. In this way, the young operators learned to balance the thrill of action with the necessity of subtlety, a combination that would define their rise in the years to come. The psychological dimension of these early crimes cannot be overstated. Each interaction, each transaction, and each calculated risk nurtured a deep understanding of human behavior. Negotiations were lessons in reading tone, posture, and expression. Alliances were exercises in gauging loyalty and assessing intentions. Through observation and experience, the young figures honed an instinct for timing, persuasion, and influence. It was a slow, deliberate education in the art of power, one that required both patience and audacity. In this sense, every small crime was not just a financial act, but a masterclass in strategy, manipulation, and the careful cultivation of reputation. Trust, once earned, became a precious commodity. Early collaborators were chosen with care, their loyalty tested through minor challenges and the observation of their reactions under pressure. Alliances formed in these initial stages often laid the groundwork for larger, more sophisticated networks. A partner who could be relied upon to remain discreet, to act predictably, and to maintain composure under scrutiny became invaluable. Conversely, betrayal, even on a small scale, offered lessons in vigilance, the necessity of contingency plans, and the importance of understanding human motivations. These early lessons in trust and betrayal would echo throughout later dealings, shaping the contours of the underworld in subtle but profound ways. The environment in which these ventures took place was as much a teacher as any mentor. Dubai's markets, ports, and neighborhoods presented both opportunity and challenge. The constant flow of people, goods, and ideas required careful observation, adaptability, and foresight. The young operators learned to navigate crowded streets without attracting attention, to recognize the patterns that indicated opportunity or risk, and to act decisively when a moment presented itself. Even in the seemingly mundane, the timing of a shipment, the path of a delivery, or the selection of a meeting place, lessons in precision, strategy, and patience were absorbed, almost imperceptibly. By the time these individuals reached adulthood, the foundation of their future operations was already in place. The combination of small-scale criminal experience, strategic observation, and mentorship had instilled not only confidence but also a nuanced understanding of risk and reward. They had learned the delicate balance between action and discretion, between ambition and caution. Each early venture, no matter how modest, contributed to a growing blueprint of influence and control that would later expand into global operations. These formative steps were invisible to the public eye, yet they were decisive in shaping the figures who would later command respect, fear, and curiosity across continents. In the quiet streets of Dubai, where the evening lights shimmer against glass towers and a distant desert hums softly, the first acts of ambition, cunning, and strategy unfolded. These were not stories of reckless youth, but carefully calculated experiments in influence, power, and survival. Each early crime, each discreet transaction, and each observation carried with it lessons that would echo throughout a lifetime. The city itself, with its constant movement and hidden opportunities, became a silent instructor, guiding the hands and minds of those who were destined to rise, quietly and relentlessly, into a world of wealth, mystery, and power. And as the night deepened, these early operators moved with precision and intent, their ambitions quietly growing, their lessons quietly absorbed, setting the stage for a life where the extraordinary would soon become the ordinary, and where the shadows of the city would conceal their ascent with impeccable discretion. As the city of Dubai continued its remarkable transformation, the ambitions of those who had mastered its hidden rhythms began to stretch beyond the modest streets and small ventures of their youth. The skyline, now dominated by towers of glass and steel, mirrored not only architectural ambition but also the growing influence of individuals who understood how to operate quietly in both the visible and invisible worlds. They had learned that power could take many forms, not only through direct control or force, but through wealth, influence, and the careful orchestration of perception. In this city of dazzling opulence, it was often the quietest, most discreet moves that carried the greatest impact. The transition from small-scale operations to major influence was subtle, almost imperceptible to the casual observer. Wealth, when accumulated quietly and strategically, became a tool that opened doors previously closed. A carefully purchased property could provide both legitimate income and a front for less visible ventures. A business investment could serve multiple purposes, generating profit, creating alliances, and masking other activities that demanded discretion. Those who mastered this interplay between legality and ambition discovered a rhythm that few could perceive, let alone challenge. Every decision was a calculation, every action a thread in a tapestry that was as intricate as it was invisible to the untrained eye. Navigating the intersection of legitimate commerce and clandestine operations required a refined understanding of both worlds. Dubai, with its booming real estate market, thriving ports, and position as a global financial hub, provided endless opportunities for those who were willing to think creatively. Front companies could operate with minimal scrutiny, while discrete networks of associates facilitated the movement of capital, goods, and information. Timing and discretion were paramount, even the most skilled operator knew that visibility could be dangerous. The ability to blend into the city's legitimate structures while simultaneously orchestrating hidden enterprises became the hallmark of a successful figure in this emerging underworld. Alliances, both formal and informal, were central to expanding influence. Strategic partnerships with established business figures, expatriates, and other operators provided access to resources, protection, and information. These relationships required a careful balance of trust and control. The lessons of earlier ventures, how to read intentions, measure loyalty, and anticipate behavior, proved invaluable. A subtle gesture, a private conversation, or a shared financial interest could solidify bonds that were strong enough to withstand external pressures but delicate enough to maintain plausible deniability. In this way, influence spread quietly, like a ripple through calm water, touching sectors and individuals far removed from the original source. The use of wealth as both shield and tool became increasingly sophisticated. Luxurious residences, high-end vehicles, and exclusive memberships were not merely symbols of status, they were instruments of strategy. A well-placed purchase could curry favor, secure discretion, or provide cover for less visible operations. Similarly, discreet charitable contributions, sponsorships, or cultural involvement offered both public legitimacy and private advantage. In the quiet elegance of boardrooms, banquet halls, and private clubs, influence was exercised with precision, often leaving no trace of its more clandestine dimensions. Observers might only see the surface: generosity, success, sophistication. Beneath that surface, decisions were carefully measured, impact carefully calibrated, and ambition quietly nurtured. Risk, though, remained an ever-present companion. Expansion into legitimate spheres did not eliminate danger, it merely transformed it. Financial missteps could expose vulnerabilities, alliances could shift unexpectedly, and scrutiny from authorities, both local and international, could never be fully ignored. Mastery required constant vigilance and adaptability. The ability to anticipate changes in markets, regulations, and human behavior was as essential as the initial courage that had driven early ventures. Those who succeeded were patient, observant, and cautious, understanding that even small oversights could unravel carefully constructed empires. The social and cultural landscape of Dubai also shaped these developments. The city's international character created a dense network of interactions. Expatriates, investors, officials, and local residents mingled in markets, offices, and social venues. Observing these interactions provided insight into patterns of influence, power, and trust. For the astute operator, every conversation, every gesture, and every alliance offered lessons. Subtle negotiation tactics, codes of conduct, and the rhythms of local business practice became tools that could be leveraged for both visible and hidden gains. Over time, these observations accumulated into a sophisticated understanding of how to navigate a complex, interconnected environment with minimal exposure and maximum advantage. As influence grew, so too did sophistication. Decision-making became less reactive and more strategic, informed by experience, observation, and calculated foresight. Moves that might seem routine, purchasing property, investing in a business, forming a partnership, were evaluated not only for immediate benefit but also for long-term positioning. Each action was a piece of a larger puzzle, a calculated step toward consolidating power, building networks, and protecting resources. This measured approach created a dual existence, one visible to the public eye, operating within the apparent structure of legitimate business, and another, hidden and deliberate, where influence and control flowed quietly beneath the surface. It was also during this period that reputation began to matter in new ways. Success was not only measured by wealth but by the perception of control, discretion, and influence. Stories circulated quietly among select circles, hinting at capabilities, intelligence, and reach. These stories, carefully curated, reinforced both respect and caution among allies and potential rivals. The subtle cultivation of myth, alongside tangible achievement, became a critical component of expanding influence. Those who could command respect without overt display, who could project authority while remaining largely unseen, positioned themselves to operate in ways that were both effective and enduring. By the time these early operators had fully embraced the intersection of wealth and influence, they had mastered a delicate art, operating with confidence and ambition while remaining invisible, crafting opportunities out of ordinary circumstances, and blending into the city's legitimate fabric while orchestrating far-reaching enterprises in the shadows. Dubai itself became a partner in this subtle game, its rapid growth, international connections, and complex economy providing a perfect canvas for discreet yet powerful operations. It was here, in the quiet interplay of ambition, strategy, and discretion, that the foundation of true influence was established, a foundation that would support greater ventures, riskier endeavors, and the expansion of an empire hidden in plain sight. And so, the first ventures into the world of significant influence were neither loud nor ostentatious. They were calculated, patient, and deliberate, grounded in observation, discipline, and the careful application of learned lessons. The city of Dubai, with all its brilliance and beauty, provided both opportunity and cover, allowing these figures to extend their reach, sharpen their skills, and establish the quiet power that would define the early stages of their underworld empire. In this way, the transition from humble beginnings to influence and wealth was complete, not through reckless daring, but through precision, subtlety, and the mastery of both human behavior and the structures of the city itself. Beneath the glittering surface, the hidden currents of control and ambition were already flowing, setting the stage for even greater ventures yet to come. Power, in the world of the Dubai underworld, was never absolute. It existed as a fragile, shifting balance, dependent not only on wealth but on perception, loyalty, and timing. As influence grew, so too did the necessity of alliances, relationships forged not merely for friendship or convenience, but for survival, strategy, and mutual gain. These connections, while essential, were never without risk. Every handshake, every whispered agreement carried the weight of potential betrayal. To maintain dominance, one had to navigate carefully, understanding that the same individuals who offered support today could become rivals tomorrow. It was a delicate dance, one that required patience, intelligence, and a constant awareness of human behavior. The formation of alliances often began quietly, almost imperceptibly. Early collaborations emerged from shared ventures or complementary skills. A merchant with international connections could provide access to resources, an associate skilled in negotiation could secure contracts that others could not. These partnerships were nurtured slowly, tested through small transactions and discreet favors. Each successful interaction strengthened trust, but even as confidence grew, caution remained paramount. Lessons from earlier years, the necessity of observation, the careful measurement of intention, and the subtle art of reading people, became crucial in managing these complex relationships. One misstep, one lapse in judgment, could unravel months or years of carefully cultivated influence. Betrayal, though often subtle, was always a looming presence. The underworld, by its nature, created situations in which loyalty was tested and ambitions clashed. Disagreements over resources, perceived slights, or shifting power dynamics could sow seeds of discord. It was in these moments that true skill revealed itself, the ability to anticipate betrayal, mitigate risk, and act decisively without revealing vulnerability. The most successful figures understood that paranoia was not a flaw but a necessary tool, a lens through which every interaction, every proposal, and every alliance could be carefully evaluated. Even those considered closest could be watched, tested, and, if necessary, outmaneuvered. The art of negotiation became a central skill in this environment. Alliances were not merely formed, they were maintained, strengthened, and occasionally dissolved through subtle diplomacy. Conversations, often private and measured, carried layers of meaning. A nod, a pause, or a carefully chosen word could communicate intent as clearly as any contract. The ability to maintain composure, project confidence, and anticipate reactions became as valuable as tangible assets. Over time, these skills allowed individuals to extend influence far beyond immediate networks, connecting with figures in business, government, and international trade. Each successful negotiation reinforced status, credibility, and the perception of unassailable intelligence. In parallel, the management of reputation played a crucial role. Stories, carefully circulated, painted individuals in a light that served strategic purposes. Rumors of generosity, decisiveness, or even ruthlessness were tools to maintain respect and deter potential adversaries. Yet these narratives were controlled, subtle, and often contradictory, designed to keep allies loyal and rivals cautious, without drawing unnecessary attention. This delicate orchestration of perception, combined with tangible influence, allowed the underworld elite to maintain a degree of invisibility while exercising significant power. The city itself, bustling and vibrant, provided both cover and context, as the true scope of influence often remained hidden behind the public veneer of business and society. Risk management, always a constant companion, became increasingly sophisticated. Each alliance carried potential benefits and hidden dangers. Financial entanglements could secure resources but also expose vulnerabilities. Associations with influential figures could enhance status but risked attracting scrutiny. The successful operator learned to balance these forces, understanding that patience and subtlety often yielded more enduring results than immediate action. Decisions were rarely impulsive, each was evaluated against multiple possible outcomes, both visible and hidden. This careful calculation distinguished those who would thrive from those whose fortunes would falter under pressure. Even amidst the complexity of alliances and rivalries, subtle acts of generosity, loyalty, and honor helped reinforce bonds. Discreet favors, timely support during crises, and the quiet acknowledgement of contributions created networks that were resilient, yet flexible. These actions, though small in isolation, accumulated over time, creating a foundation of trust and mutual benefit that was difficult to disrupt. At the same time, the ever-present awareness of human ambition ensured that no relationship was taken for granted, no loyalty assumed, and no opportunity overlooked. The balance between caution and connection was a constant exercise, requiring both emotional intelligence and strategic foresight. The interplay between visibility and invisibility remained central. Publicly, alliances could appear benign or incidental, with collaborations framed as legitimate business partnerships or social connections. Privately, they formed the backbone of an intricate network that controlled influence, information, and resources. It was this duality, operating openly while wielding unseen control, that defined the sophistication of Dubai's underworld. Those who mastered it moved with confidence through both spheres, maintaining power while avoiding unnecessary exposure, and ensuring that influence was extended, protected, and leveraged effectively. The stakes of these relationships extended beyond individual gain. A well-placed alliance could secure access to entire markets, facilitate large-scale ventures, and create opportunities that were otherwise inaccessible. Conversely, a fractured connection could jeopardize operations, erode credibility, and expose vulnerabilities. Understanding these dynamics required not only intelligence but also experience, intuition, and patience. Each partnership, negotiation, and strategic move was part of a broader, ongoing calculation, a constant assessment of human nature, circumstance, and timing. The ability to navigate this complexity was both a test and a testament to the emerging power of the underworld elite. In the calm of Dubai's evening, when skyscrapers shimmered against a darkening sky and the hum of the city softened, the quiet orchestration of alliances continued. Meetings, conversations, and subtle gestures shaped the flow of influence, often unnoticed by the wider world. Trust, loyalty, and subtle power dynamics governed the landscape, weaving a network that connected people, resources, and information across sectors and borders. The delicate balance of power was maintained not by overt displays but through strategy, observation, and an understanding of human ambition. In this world, subtlety was strength, discretion was necessity, and the careful cultivation of relationships was as vital as any fortune or resource. Through these early experiences, the young figures of Dubai's underworld learned the most enduring lesson, that power is not merely about wealth, violence, or dominance, but about perception, relationships, and timing. The alliances they forged and the betrayals they survived became the foundation of an empire that could influence both seen and unseen realms. In the quiet, reflective spaces of the city, amid its bustling streets and gleaming towers, the delicate, intricate web of loyalty, strategy, and trust began to solidify, a web that would define their rise, protect their ambitions, and guide their path toward unprecedented influence, all while remaining largely hidden beneath the dazzling surface of Dubai itself. Beneath the glittering skyline of Dubai, a silent economy thrived, invisible to the casual observer yet immense in its scale and influence. While the world admired the towering skyscrapers, luxury shopping malls, and opulent hotels, an entirely different network of commerce was quietly operating in the shadows. This was a shadow economy built on gold, oil, rare commodities, and discrete financial transactions. It was a realm where fortunes moved with the same precision and discretion as legitimate business, yet where laws were often bent, blurred, or quietly circumvented. To those who understood its mechanisms, it was both an opportunity and a proving ground, a place where intelligence, cunning, and patience determined success more than force or overt display. Gold, in particular, played a central role in this hidden network. Dubai, historically known as a trading hub, had long been a center for precious metals, attracting merchants from across the region. The allure of gold was not merely its beauty or intrinsic value, but its ability to be moved, traded, and leveraged with minimal scrutiny. Within this market, networks of trusted contacts, discreet intermediaries, and strategic shipments allowed individuals to amass considerable wealth while maintaining a degree of invisibility. Each transaction, whether small or substantial, required careful planning, timing, and an understanding of the complex interplay between legitimate and illicit channels. Even a single misstep, a shipment delayed, a misdirected payment, or a miscalculated risk, could unravel months of careful maneuvering. Oil, too, offered opportunities for influence and profit. As one of the world's fastest-growing hubs for energy trade, Dubai attracted multinational companies, investors, and officials. For those in the shadow economy, knowledge and access to energy markets became invaluable. Small manipulations of contracts, discrete partnerships, and the orchestration of deals in less visible sectors created avenues for enormous gains. It was not simply about acquiring wealth but about understanding the flow of resources, the movement of information, and the timing of opportunity. Each interaction required patience, strategy, and a subtle grasp of both human behavior and market mechanics. Luxury goods and contraband also moved quietly through the city's channels. High-end vehicles, rare electronics, and imported commodities often provided a means of laundering money, creating alliances, and exercising influence. These transactions were executed with care, often behind the polished facade of legitimate trade. Discretion was paramount. The most successful operators understood that visibility could invite scrutiny, and that even a hint of impropriety could compromise both wealth and position. In these exchanges, experience and intuition mattered as much as legal knowledge or financial acumen. Each deal became a lesson in precision, subtlety, and strategic foresight. The mechanics of the shadow economy were intricate, relying on a combination of trust, secrecy, and skill. Accounts and records were carefully constructed to create plausible deniability, allowing financial movement without attracting attention. Offshore entities, layered ownership structures, and discrete intermediaries ensured that transactions could be conducted safely while preserving anonymity. For the observant and patient operator, this system offered not only security but a canvas for strategic growth. Each layer, each connection, each discrete act of calculation reinforced both influence and protection, forming the backbone of an empire largely invisible to the public eye. This world was governed by codes unwritten yet rigorously enforced. Loyalty, discretion, and reliability were the currency of relationships. A trusted intermediary, a careful partner, or a reliable associate could determine the success of a venture. A misstep, betrayal, or lapse in judgment could have consequences far beyond financial loss. The lessons learned from these networks were subtle but profound. Influence was as much about relationships as it was about capital, and discretion was always more valuable than visibility. Patience, observation, and timing were the cornerstones of power in this intricate economy, shaping both strategy and behavior. Even as the shadow economy grew in sophistication, it remained intertwined with Dubai's visible prosperity. The movement of goods and capital often mirrored legitimate commerce, creating a seamless integration that made detection difficult. For example, luxury imports could appear on shipping manifests alongside perfectly legal products, or oil trades could be structured through legitimate corporations while routing a portion of profits through discrete channels. The genius of this system was its invisibility. To the casual observer, all activity appeared ordinary, yet beneath the surface, complex networks of influence, wealth, and power were quietly consolidated. The psychological dimension of operating in this hidden economy was equally significant. Every transaction carried potential rewards and risks, and every decision required careful assessment of human motives, market forces, and legal boundaries. Operators learned to anticipate reactions, read intentions, and maintain composure under pressure. In many ways, each act was a lesson in both strategy and psychology, reinforcing the importance of subtlety, patience, and the ability to act decisively when the moment demanded it. Success depended not merely on wealth but on a deep understanding of people, systems, and timing. By navigating this shadow economy, Dubai's underworld figures were able to consolidate power and expand their influence in ways that were largely invisible to the general public. The wealth generated was not only a measure of financial success but also a tool for control, a means of building alliances, and a shield against scrutiny. Each carefully orchestrated deal, each strategic acquisition, and each discreet maneuver reinforced a network that was resilient, adaptable, and enduring. In this environment, influence flowed quietly but steadily, shaping the contours of the underworld with precision and foresight. And so, the shadow economy of Dubai was not a mere backdrop to the city's gleaming exterior but a dynamic, pulsating force in its own right. Gold, oil, luxury goods, and financial maneuvering became instruments of both ambition and survival. The hidden structures of trade and influence allowed those who understood them to move with freedom, discretion, and calculated confidence. It was a world where patience was power, observation was currency, and subtlety was the greatest strength. Beneath the glittering skyline, the invisible currents of wealth and control flowed relentlessly, quietly shaping the fortunes, alliances, and ambitions of those who had learned to navigate them with skill and precision. With wealth quietly amassed and influence steadily expanding, the figures of Dubai's underworld began to understand the true power of networks, connections that could reach beyond the city, across borders, and into spheres where few could imagine influence extended. These networks were not built on coercion alone, nor merely on financial leverage, they were crafted with subtlety, patience, and strategic foresight. Every connection was a thread in a complex web, linking people, resources, and opportunities in ways that amplified both security and reach. From the outset, the importance of trust and discretion had been clear, but as operations grew, so did the necessity of a broader, more intricate system of alliances. The initial networks were intimate and carefully curated. Early associates from small ventures, trusted intermediaries in trade, and mentors who had guided fledgling ambitions formed the core. These relationships were tested repeatedly, often in quiet ways, through the orchestration of deals, coordination of resources, or navigation of small crises. Successes reinforced loyalty, while failures, or even perceived slights, offered lessons in judgment, caution, and the subtle management of human behavior. Over time, this inner circle became more sophisticated, capable of managing larger operations with precision while maintaining the discreet facade necessary to remain unnoticed by authorities and rivals alike. Expansion of these networks required both creativity and strategy. Alliances were formed not only with individuals but with organizations, business entities, and even foreign contacts whose interests aligned with discrete objectives. The geography of influence extended from the streets and ports of Dubai to international trade hubs, financial centers, and distant markets. By leveraging knowledge, timing, and relationships, the underworld figures were able to orchestrate transactions, secure resources, and gain intelligence that few could access. Each link strengthened the overall structure, while each interaction carried a subtle lesson in diplomacy, discretion, and human nature. In this way, networks were both operational and educational, simultaneously expanding reach and refining skill. A crucial component of network building was reputation management. Influence was reinforced not only by wealth or action but by perception. Stories, carefully planted and selectively shared, could enhance credibility, instill caution in potential adversaries, and cement trust with allies. The narrative of competence, intelligence, and discretion became an invisible shield, allowing the underworld elite to operate effectively while maintaining a low public profile. In addition, subtle signals, timing of appearances, strategic participation in social or business events, and controlled exposure, reinforced authority and reliability without revealing the full extent of influence. The most successful individuals understood that the perception of control often mattered as much as control itself. Trust, while invaluable, was always measured and tested. Even the closest associates could be evaluated through small challenges or observations of behavior under pressure. Loyalty was not assumed but earned continuously through action, reliability, and strategic discretion. Conversely, those who faltered or betrayed confidence were carefully managed, often removed from the network before their impact could become harmful. These lessons reinforced the importance of patience, foresight, and subtle intervention in preserving the integrity and resilience of complex alliances. In this environment, every interaction carried both opportunity and risk, demanding constant vigilance and thoughtful judgment. The operational aspect of networks was equally critical. Coordination of resources, movement of goods, and orchestration of financial transactions relied on the seamless integration of trusted participants. Each individual played a specific role, contributing skills, knowledge, or access that complemented the broader system. Communication was discreet, often conducted through indirect channels, private meetings, or coded exchanges. Precision and timing were paramount, even minor disruptions could have cascading effects. The ability to anticipate potential challenges, mitigate risk, and ensure smooth execution defined the most effective networks. These systems, though invisible to the outside world, functioned with remarkable efficiency, combining sophistication with subtlety. Beyond operational efficiency, networks served as protection. The ability to call on allies for intelligence, support, or intervention created a buffer against threats, whether from competitors, law enforcement, or unpredictable market forces. Knowledge of human behavior, combined with careful planning, allowed for preemptive measures that minimized exposure and preserved control. In this way, influence was self-reinforcing. The stronger the network, the greater the security, and the greater the security, the more opportunities could be pursued safely. This cyclical dynamic allowed ambition to flourish while risk remained carefully managed. The expansion of networks also required strategic patience. Connections could not be forced or rushed, relationships had to develop naturally, nurtured over time through shared experience, reliability, and subtle demonstrations of competence. A single misstep, whether an uncalculated action or a breach of discretion, could jeopardize trust and compromise the broader system. Successful operators understood that influence was cumulative, built over years, and that every interaction had the potential to reinforce or undermine long-term objectives. This patient approach ensured resilience, adaptability, and sustainability, key traits in a world where fortunes and influence were never static. Networks were not merely functional, they also taught lessons in leadership and strategy. Orchestrating complex alliances required not only logistical skill but psychological acuity. Understanding the motivations, fears, and ambitions of each participant allowed leaders to guide behavior subtly, maintain harmony, and ensure alignment with broader goals. Each decision, each negotiation, each calculated risk became a learning opportunity, refining intuition and judgment. The cultivation of influence through networks became both a practical necessity and a personal education in human nature, strategy, and foresight. And so, in the calm, reflective spaces of Dubai, when the city's lights shimmered against the night sky and the hum of the metropolis softened, networks were quietly expanding, consolidating, and reinforcing the foundations of power. The city's underworld moved with precision, intelligence, and discretion, leveraging connections that reached far beyond its borders, creating influence that few could perceive and even fewer could challenge. Through careful observation, patience, and strategic orchestration, these networks became both the backbone and the shield of the emerging empire, ensuring that wealth, control, and opportunity flowed quietly, efficiently, and invisibly, beneath the dazzling exterior of Dubai itself. By the time the underworld figures had established reliable networks, a new dimension of power emerged, the subtle orchestration of influence beyond immediate transactions and alliances. It was no longer enough to manage wealth, maintain trusted relationships, or navigate discrete markets. The next stage required foresight, strategy, and the careful cultivation of reputation. Influence had to extend into the spheres of policy, law, and social perception, all while remaining largely invisible. This was a delicate art, one that demanded patience, intelligence, and an almost instinctive understanding of human nature. Those who mastered it could shape not only markets and individuals but entire sectors, quietly guiding outcomes in ways that appeared natural and unremarkable to outsiders. The sophistication of this approach lay in its subtlety. Power was exercised not through overt action but through quiet persuasion, carefully positioned incentives, and the management of perception. A business decision could create loyalty among associates, a financial contribution could secure discretion from officials, and a strategically placed rumor could influence competitors' behavior. Every move was calculated to produce maximum effect with minimal exposure. The art of indirect influence became paramount, as it allowed control without confrontation, manipulation without visibility, and strategy without risk of public scrutiny. It was an invisible hand guiding events while leaving observers unaware of the source of direction. Timing, as always, was critical. Strategic interventions had to be executed at precisely the right moment to produce the desired outcome. Opportunities were rarely created, they were recognized and exploited with careful patience. A single misstep, whether impatience, overreach, or miscalculation, could have far-reaching consequences, eroding trust, destabilizing alliances, or attracting unwanted attention. Mastery of timing required both intuition and experience, the ability to sense shifts in market dynamics, human behavior, and social currents before they became apparent to others. It was a skill honed over years, sharpened by careful observation, trial, and reflection. The management of perception played a central role in consolidating influence. Reputation was currency, sometimes more valuable than gold or property. A well-crafted image could inspire respect, caution, or admiration, while the mismanagement of perception could invite scrutiny, challenge, or betrayal. Subtle narratives, about competence, discretion, generosity, or decisiveness, were constructed and maintained carefully, often through intermediaries, public actions, or controlled interactions. These narratives reinforced alliances, deterred rivals, and allowed the underworld figures to operate with greater freedom. They created an aura of authority that required no overt assertion, as the power was perceived rather than proclaimed. Education and knowledge also became key instruments of influence. The most successful figures were not simply wealthy or connected, they were strategically informed, understanding laws, regulations, and international markets in ways that allowed them to anticipate challenges and identify opportunities. Knowledge of financial structures, legal frameworks, and trade regulations enabled them to operate at a scale and with a subtlety that others could not match. Each decision was informed not only by immediate circumstances but also by a broader understanding of the structures in which they operated. Strategy and insight became as valuable as capital or manpower, enhancing both influence and security. Risk assessment evolved alongside influence. As operations expanded, exposure to authorities, competitors, and unpredictable variables increased. Calculated risk became a central element of strategy. Decisions were rarely impulsive, they were evaluated against multiple scenarios, considering both immediate and long-term consequences. The capacity to act decisively when opportunity presented itself, while maintaining reserves for contingencies, became a defining characteristic of power. Prudence, foresight, and adaptability distinguished those who could maintain influence from those who were overwhelmed by unforeseen developments. The orchestration of influence extended even into cultural and social spheres. Discreet participation in philanthropy, sponsorship of events, or cultivation of public trust served multiple purposes. They reinforced positive perception, created additional networks of connection, and provided opportunities to exercise subtle guidance over social dynamics. Even interactions that appeared ordinary, attending a gathering, offering advice, or providing support, were calculated gestures, each contributing to the intricate tapestry of influence. Over time, these seemingly small actions accumulated, creating a broad and resilient base of authority that extended well beyond immediate business or criminal ventures. One of the most remarkable aspects of this stage was the ability to operate invisibly while commanding tangible outcomes. Decisions influenced markets, individuals, and policies without drawing attention to the orchestrator. Competitors might react to shifting circumstances, regulators might respond to changing conditions, and associates might adjust behavior, all without perceiving the subtle guidance at work. Influence became both a shield and a tool, allowing operations to proceed with confidence while minimizing exposure. It was a form of quiet mastery, blending foresight, psychology, and strategic calculation into a seamless exercise of power. By now, the underworld figures of Dubai had achieved a rare equilibrium. Wealth, networks, knowledge, and influence converged to create both freedom and security. Yet this power, while formidable, was never absolute. The environment remained dynamic, threats existed in the form of rivals, regulatory oversight, and market fluctuations, and human behavior remained unpredictable. Success required constant vigilance, ongoing refinement of strategy, and continuous observation. Each day presented opportunities and risks, reinforcing the lessons of patience, discretion, and foresight that had guided them from the earliest ventures into crime and trade. And so, in the quiet hours of the night, when the city's dazzling lights reflected off shimmering towers and the desert beyond whispered softly under the stars, influence flowed silently through Dubai. It was the culmination of years of careful cultivation, of networks built, transactions executed, perception managed, and strategy refined. Power had become an invisible force, shaping outcomes without revealing its source, guiding both opportunity and caution with subtle precision. Those who had mastered this intricate art moved through the city and beyond, unseen but unchallenged, quietly steering their empire, protected by knowledge, strategy, and the careful orchestration of human nature itself. It was a world where patience, discretion, and insight were as potent as wealth, and where influence could be exercised without ever casting a shadow. With influence quietly secured and networks firmly established, the next challenge was the management of power itself. In this stage, the underworld figures of Dubai were no longer solely focused on wealth accumulation or building alliances, they were navigating the complex dynamics of authority, perception, and control. Power, they understood, was not simply the possession of resources, it was the ability to shape outcomes, guide decisions, and maintain equilibrium among both allies and rivals. The delicate balance of dominance and discretion had become central. Too much visibility could provoke opposition, while too little could invite neglect or misunderstanding. Mastery required constant awareness, a nuanced understanding of human behavior, and an intuitive grasp of timing and circumstance. The exercise of power in this context relied heavily on subtle orchestration. Decisions were rarely made in isolation, they were carefully calculated to influence multiple layers simultaneously. A financial maneuver could stabilize internal alliances while deterring competitors, a discreet intervention could prevent conflict before it arose, and a seemingly minor gesture could reinforce loyalty or trust. Every action was considered in terms of its ripple effects, with attention paid not only to immediate outcomes but also to long-term implications. This approach required patience and foresight, transforming ordinary transactions into instruments of control and strategy. Reputation continued to play a crucial role in consolidating authority. In an environment where observation was constant and information flowed quietly through networks, perception often equaled power. Maintaining an image of competence, decisiveness, and discretion created a psychological advantage over both allies and adversaries. Stories, both true and carefully curated, reinforced the perception of influence and capability, ensuring that the operators' reach extended beyond visible actions. Even subtle behaviors, timing, demeanor, or choice of associates, were carefully calibrated to sustain credibility. In this way, reputation became both a shield and a tool, reinforcing the quiet authority that allowed operations to proceed smoothly. Decision-making at this stage also required strategic flexibility. Circumstances could shift rapidly, economic fluctuations, rival initiatives, or changes in regulation could alter the landscape unexpectedly. Successful figures learned to anticipate these shifts, preparing contingencies and adapting tactics in real time. Flexibility did not imply instability, rather, it was a conscious readiness to respond to changing conditions without compromising long-term objectives. The ability to pivot while maintaining influence distinguished those capable of sustained success from those who faltered under pressure. Psychology remained a vital element in the exercise of power. Understanding the motivations, fears, and desires of allies and rivals enabled subtle guidance and influence without overt interference. Observing behavior, interpreting signals, and gauging reactions allowed leaders to nudge events in desired directions, often without the participants themselves recognizing the intervention. This psychological acumen extended to negotiation, conflict resolution, and alliance management, allowing the underworld elite to operate with precision and control. Each interaction became a strategic opportunity to reinforce authority, maintain balance, and shape outcomes favorably. The management of conflict was another defining aspect of this stage. Rivalries, competition, and potential betrayals were inevitable in a world where influence and wealth were concentrated in discreet hands. Preventing disputes from escalating, managing tensions among allies, and neutralizing threats without exposure required diplomacy, subtle intervention, and careful planning. The most effective operators understood that visible confrontation was often the least desirable course. Indirect influence, mediated actions, and controlled interventions were far more effective in maintaining stability and control. Conflict, when handled correctly, could even be leveraged to strengthen networks, reinforce loyalty, and demonstrate competence. Strategic patience remained a constant principle. The timing of actions, whether launching an initiative, negotiating a deal, or addressing a threat, was as important as the actions themselves. Patience allowed observation, understanding, and precise execution. Decisions were rarely rushed. Instead, they were made after careful evaluation of multiple variables, including potential responses, risks, and opportunities. This patience reinforced both control and discretion, ensuring that influence was exercised deliberately rather than reactively. Over time, such measured execution established a reputation for reliability, foresight, and calm authority. The orchestration of resources also became increasingly sophisticated. Capital, information, and human assets were managed with precision, ensuring that every element contributed to stability, growth, and influence. Financial structures, investment strategies, and discrete logistical operations were aligned to maintain resilience, flexibility, and protection. Resources were leveraged not only for profit but also for strategic positioning, risk mitigation, and the reinforcement of alliances. The interplay of tangible assets and intangible influence created a system that was self-reinforcing, allowing for both expansion and security without unnecessary exposure. Finally, the mastery of power at this stage emphasized sustainability over spectacle. The goal was not to dominate visibly or to flaunt control, but to operate in a way that maximized freedom, influence, and security over the long term. Each action, from financial decisions to relationship management, was calibrated to preserve the delicate balance of authority, perception, and discretion. By maintaining this equilibrium, the underworld figures of Dubai could exercise far-reaching influence while remaining largely invisible, shaping outcomes across commerce, networks, and human behavior without drawing attention to themselves. And so, beneath the shimmering skyline, amid the quiet hum of the city and the gentle desert breeze, the underworld's quiet orchestration of power continued. Authority was exercised with subtlety, strategy, and foresight. Influence flowed invisibly through networks, shaping markets, alliances, and perception. Wealth, relationships, and intelligence converged into a system of control that was both resilient and adaptable. In this invisible realm, mastery of power was a careful, deliberate craft, one that required patience, observation, and an intimate understanding of both people and circumstances. It was a world where influence was unseen yet undeniable, where discretion was the ultimate strength, and where the architects of this hidden empire continued to shape the destiny of their domain with quiet precision. By now, the figures of Dubai's underworld had moved far beyond mere wealth accumulation. They had learned to navigate networks, exercise influence, and orchestrate power with precision and subtlety. Yet even at this stage, the challenge of maintaining stability loomed large. The intricate web of alliances, finances, and perception was only as strong as its weakest link. A single misstep could unravel months or years of careful planning, exposing vulnerabilities to rivals, authorities, or internal dissent. For this reason, the management of risk, the anticipation of threats, and the cultivation of resilience became central pillars of strategy. In this world, patience and foresight were as valuable as gold, and discretion as essential as intelligence. One of the most pressing concerns was the management of internal networks. Allies, associates, and intermediaries were both assets and potential liabilities. Loyalty could waver, ambitions could clash, and minor grievances could escalate into significant disruptions. To maintain cohesion, leaders relied on a combination of observation, subtle reinforcement, and calculated intervention. Regular interactions, often discreet, measured, and seemingly casual, allowed them to gauge sentiment, identify potential problems, and reinforce trust. A carefully worded compliment, a timely favor, or the subtle acknowledgement of an ally's contribution could strengthen bonds without drawing attention. Conversely, inaction or oversight could erode confidence and destabilize relationships, highlighting the importance of vigilance in managing human dynamics. External threats required equally careful handling. Competitors, both visible and hidden, were always assessing opportunities to exploit vulnerabilities. Regulatory oversight, inspections, and the unpredictable scrutiny of authorities posed a constant risk. In this environment, the ability to anticipate challenges before they arose became a critical skill. Intelligence gathering, pattern recognition, and strategic foresight allowed the underworld figures to stay ahead of potential disruptions. By understanding the likely actions of rivals and regulators, they could design contingencies, allocate resources wisely, and intervene discreetly when necessary. The goal was to maintain operational stability while minimizing exposure, preserving both influence and opportunity. Financial management remained a cornerstone of resilience. Beyond generating wealth, funds had to be structured and deployed in ways that protected assets, minimized risk, and created flexibility. Diversification of investments, discreet use of offshore structures, and careful management of transactions allowed operators to maintain a buffer against both financial and operational shocks. Wealth became not merely a measure of success but a tool of strategic security, enabling the continuation of influence even under pressure. Decisions about allocation, movement, and utilization of resources were made with foresight, balancing immediate needs against long-term stability. The psychological dimension of maintaining an underworld empire grew increasingly important. Leaders needed to balance authority with discretion, assertiveness with subtlety, and vigilance with patience. Each interaction, whether with an ally, rival, or associate, offered insight into motivations, intentions, and potential vulnerabilities. By observing behavior carefully, interpreting subtle cues, and anticipating responses, they could guide outcomes without direct confrontation. This nuanced understanding of human behavior became a defining feature of leadership, allowing influence to extend beyond direct control and into the realm of perception, expectation, and unspoken trust. Crisis management, while ideally avoided, was inevitable in such a complex ecosystem. When challenges arose, financial discrepancies, strained relationships, or external scrutiny, they demanded swift, precise, and measured responses. The most effective operators relied on contingency planning, discreet intervention, and strategic communication. Crises were opportunities to reinforce loyalty, demonstrate competence, and maintain stability, rather than occasions for panic or exposure. By navigating turbulence with calm authority, leaders could both resolve immediate issues and strengthen the overall resilience of their network, turning potential threats into demonstrations of control. Cultural and social navigation remained intertwined with operational stability. Discreet engagement in social, philanthropic, or professional circles reinforced perception, created additional avenues of influence, and provided early warning of potential shifts in power dynamics. Even minor gestures, a well-timed appearance, a subtle contribution, or a strategic alliance in public life, could influence perception, reinforce relationships, and maintain balance across networks. The interplay of public and private influence allowed operators to exercise control indirectly, maintaining operational security while shaping the environment to their advantage. Observation and continuous learning were vital to sustaining success. The dynamics of human behavior, market forces, and regulatory landscapes were never static. Each day presented new information, subtle shifts, and opportunities to refine strategy. Leaders cultivated a mindset of ongoing attentiveness, constantly analyzing, adapting, and responding with discretion. Success was therefore not the result of a single act but of cumulative mastery, an accumulation of insights, strategies, and interventions executed with patience and precision. Over time, this approach created a system of influence that was resilient, adaptable, and self-reinforcing. By integrating careful human management, strategic foresight, financial prudence, and social acumen, the underworld figures of Dubai created a stable, enduring foundation for their operations. They had learned that power was most secure when exercised subtly, influence most potent when invisible, and authority most respected when perceived rather than displayed. This equilibrium allowed them to pursue ambition while minimizing risk, ensuring that their empire could withstand both external pressures and internal challenges. The quiet mastery of these principles marked a turning point in their trajectory, from opportunistic operators to sophisticated architects of a resilient, largely unseen empire. And so, as the city's lights shimmered against the night sky and the hum of traffic softened to a gentle murmur, stability became a central thread in the fabric of their operations. Beneath the surface of Dubai's opulence, influence flowed quietly, carefully managed, and strategically guided. Every alliance, every transaction, every gesture was calibrated to preserve balance, reinforce trust, and protect both power and opportunity. In this way, the underworld empire not only survived but thrived, grounded in patience, foresight, and the subtle orchestration of human, financial, and social dynamics. Here, in the calm of night, the delicate art of maintaining power continued, quiet, calculated, and enduring, preparing the stage for expansion, ambition, and the challenges yet to come. As the underworld of Dubai continued to operate quietly beneath the city's glittering exterior, a new challenge emerged: the management of influence across increasingly complex and far-reaching networks. By this stage, the architects of this hidden empire had not only secured wealth and alliances but had also cultivated a sophisticated understanding of perception, timing, and human behavior. Power, they realized, was most effective when exercised subtly, allowing outcomes to unfold as though guided by natural forces rather than deliberate orchestration. This required both patience and foresight, an ability to anticipate consequences, and the skill to act decisively when opportunity or risk demanded intervention. The expansion of influence brought with it a greater need for coordination. Networks that once consisted of a small circle of trusted associates now extended across cities, countries, and even continents. Managing these connections required careful attention to communication, trust, and strategic alignment. Each link in the network had to function smoothly, with clear expectations, reliability, and discretion. The slightest misalignment, a misunderstanding, a delayed action, or an unanticipated reaction, could have consequences that rippled through the entire system. It was a delicate balancing act, demanding constant observation and subtle intervention, yet executed with calm precision to avoid disrupting the natural flow of operations. Strategic foresight became increasingly critical at this stage. Understanding how small decisions could influence larger trends allowed the underworld figures to operate with confidence and minimal exposure. Financial investments were carefully timed, alliances were nurtured gradually, and influence was exercised in ways that guided behavior without overtly imposing it. Opportunities were not created in haste, they were identified, anticipated, and seized when conditions were most favorable. This approach required both patience and a deep understanding of human nature, as every interaction and every gesture could subtly shift the balance of loyalty, trust, and perception. The management of risk remained an omnipresent concern. The expansion of operations, both visible and invisible, meant that exposure to scrutiny, competition, and unforeseen events increased. Leaders developed strategies to mitigate risk, from diversifying financial assets and creating buffer zones within operations to carefully monitoring allies and anticipating potential challenges. These precautions were not merely defensive, they allowed for calculated interventions that could reinforce influence and control. In this environment, risk was not eliminated but understood, measured, and navigated with intelligence and subtlety. Reputation management continued to play a central role in sustaining influence. At this stage, perception often carried as much weight as tangible assets or operational control. Maintaining an image of competence, discretion, and reliability was essential to deter rivals, inspire confidence in allies, and sustain operational freedom. Carefully curated narratives, subtle signals, and controlled exposure allowed leaders to cultivate authority without overt displays. Even minor gestures, such as timely engagement in public events or private acknowledgments of loyalty, reinforced credibility and trust across networks. In this way, perception became both a shield and a tool, enhancing the effectiveness of every strategic action. The psychological dimension of leadership also grew more sophisticated. Understanding the motivations, fears, and ambitions of associates and competitors allowed for subtle guidance and influence. Leaders learned to anticipate reactions, manage expectations, and create alignment without the need for direct confrontation. The most successful operators were those who could act indirectly, shaping outcomes through observation, suggestion, and timing rather than force or coercion. Every interaction, no matter how small, was an opportunity to reinforce loyalty, encourage cooperation, and solidify trust within the network. Conflict management remained an ongoing responsibility. Rivalries, misunderstandings, and potential betrayals were inevitable in a world where influence and wealth intersected. Yet the goal was rarely to confront directly. Instead, subtle interventions, mediated discussions, and discreet problem-solving were preferred. By addressing issues quietly and strategically, leaders could maintain stability while demonstrating competence and reinforcing their authority. In many cases, effectively managing conflict strengthened alliances and enhanced credibility, turning challenges into opportunities for consolidation and growth. Financial strategy remained tightly interwoven with influence. Beyond accumulating wealth, funds were allocated, leveraged, and deployed to reinforce power, maintain discretion, and create flexibility. Investments were structured to provide both profit and protection, ensuring that resources could be used strategically to address emerging challenges or seize opportunities. The movement of assets was conducted with careful planning, often through layered structures and discrete channels, allowing operations to continue smoothly while minimizing visibility. Wealth was not merely a measure of success, it was a tool for stability, influence, and the preservation of strategic freedom. Observation and continuous learning were essential components of sustained success. The landscape of markets, human behavior, and regulatory oversight was never static, and adapting to subtle changes became a daily necessity. Leaders honed the ability to recognize patterns, anticipate shifts, and adjust strategy with precision. These insights informed decisions across financial, social, and operational domains, allowing influence to be exercised efficiently and discreetly. Mastery of this continuous feedback loop reinforced both authority and security, creating a resilient system capable of withstanding unforeseen challenges. Through this careful orchestration of networks, perception, and resources, the underworld figures of Dubai achieved a remarkable equilibrium. Influence flowed quietly yet decisively, wealth was leveraged strategically, and relationships were managed with subtle skill. The empire they had built was resilient, adaptable, and largely invisible, its power derived not from overt force but from intelligence, patience, and the meticulous calibration of human and material resources. In the calm of night, beneath the shimmering skyline, their presence was felt not through spectacle but through the subtle shifts and decisions that quietly guided markets, alliances, and behavior. And so, as the city of Dubai settled into the quiet of evening, the architects of this hidden empire continued their work with calm precision. Influence extended seamlessly across networks, risks were mitigated with foresight, and perception was carefully managed to reinforce authority. The lessons of patience, discretion, and strategic insight were applied continuously, creating a foundation for enduring power. In this quiet, calculated orchestration, the underworld of Dubai thrived, an empire of subtlety and intelligence, hidden in plain sight, yet capable of shaping outcomes far beyond what any observer could immediately perceive. It was a world where calm observation, deliberate action, and patient mastery of human nature defined true power, guiding an invisible empire toward a future of enduring influence and quiet control. As Dubai's underworld reached a stage of quiet dominance, attention naturally turned to consolidation and the reinforcement of control. Wealth, networks, and influence had been established, but the true test of power lay in sustaining authority over an increasingly complex system. The empire could only endure if it was resilient to both internal fluctuations and external pressures. Maintaining this stability required meticulous planning, careful observation, and a deep understanding of human behavior. It was a phase where foresight became as crucial as strength, patience as vital as strategy, and subtlety more powerful than overt action. Internal cohesion became a focal point. As networks expanded, the number of individuals with access to resources, information, or influence also grew. Each relationship, each link in the chain, was a potential point of vulnerability if not carefully managed. Leaders understood that even small cracks in loyalty or trust could ripple through the system, undermining stability. Regular assessment of associates, discreet reinforcement of allegiance, and subtle interventions became essential practices. A gesture of appreciation, a quiet acknowledgement of effort, or the strategic delegation of responsibility could strengthen bonds and prevent dissatisfaction from escalating into conflict. External threats required equal vigilance. The visibility of Dubai as a hub of international trade, finance, and luxury meant that scrutiny, both legal and competitive, was ever present. Competitors sought advantage wherever they could find it, regulatory authorities monitored transactions, and shifting economic or political conditions could create unpredictable challenges. Navigating this landscape demanded constant intelligence gathering, careful analysis of patterns, and the foresight to anticipate consequences before they occurred. By maintaining awareness of potential risks, underworld figures could act preemptively, neutralizing threats and maintaining operational continuity without drawing unnecessary attention. Financial management evolved into an increasingly sophisticated discipline. Beyond simple accumulation of wealth, resources were strategically allocated to ensure flexibility, resilience, and security. Investments were diversified across both visible and discreet channels, providing protection against sudden changes in markets, regulations, or alliances. Funds were deployed not only to generate profit but also to reinforce influence, maintain discretion, and secure loyalty. Each decision regarding the use of assets was measured against multiple scenarios, ensuring that the empire could weather shocks while continuing to operate effectively. The subtle orchestration of wealth became both a tool of power and a safeguard against instability. The psychological dimension of leadership continued to be central. Understanding the ambitions, fears, and motivations of associates, rivals, and allies allowed leaders to guide behavior subtly. Every interaction became an opportunity to reinforce trust, inspire loyalty, or preempt potential challenges. Observing body language, tone, and reaction allowed subtle influence without overt coercion. The most effective operators knew that power exercised gently, strategically, and discreetly often yielded more enduring results than overt displays of dominance. Patience, empathy, and calculated intervention became essential elements of daily management. Conflict management remained a nuanced and ongoing responsibility. Disputes were inevitable, whether arising from resource allocation, personal ambition, or misunderstandings. Yet confrontation was rarely the preferred solution. Instead, indirect mediation, discreet problem-solving, and strategic negotiation were employed to resolve issues before they escalated. By handling conflict with subtlety and foresight, leaders could maintain unity, reinforce credibility, and preserve stability. In many cases, effectively resolving tensions enhanced loyalty, strengthened alliances, and demonstrated both competence and authority, further consolidating power. Strategic observation and continuous learning were vital to enduring influence. The dynamics of both human behavior and external systems were constantly evolving. Effective leaders maintained a posture of attentiveness, analyzing patterns, interpreting subtle signals, and adapting strategies to changing conditions. Each observation informed decisions across financial, operational, and relational domains, reinforcing resilience and enhancing the capacity for precise intervention. Mastery of this feedback loop ensured that influence could be exercised efficiently, quietly, and sustainably. Reputation management at this stage extended beyond immediate circles. Public perception, while not always directly relevant to clandestine operations, influenced interactions with broader networks, regulatory authorities, and potential partners. Carefully curated narratives about competence, discretion, and reliability served as both deterrent and reinforcement. Even seemingly minor public engagements were evaluated for their impact on perception, ensuring that the aura of authority remained consistent and credible. Reputation thus became an invisible pillar, supporting influence, security, and operational continuity. The orchestration of resources, both tangible and intangible, became increasingly interdependent. Financial assets, human networks, information flows, and social connections were aligned to reinforce each other, creating a system of mutual reinforcement. Disruption in one area could affect the others, making careful monitoring and management essential. Subtle adjustments, redirecting resources, reinforcing alliances, or recalibrating strategy, ensured the system remained balanced, resilient, and adaptive to evolving circumstances. This sophisticated interplay allowed the underworld to maintain control while remaining largely invisible, preserving freedom and flexibility in the execution of operations. Finally, sustainability emerged as the ultimate measure of success. Temporary gains, dramatic displays of power, or rapid expansion offered little long-term security. Enduring influence required the patient cultivation of relationships, strategic deployment of resources, and careful observation of both human and systemic dynamics. Leaders understood that stability, resilience, and discretion were the foundations upon which wealth, authority, and opportunity could be preserved. By continuously reinforcing these principles, the underworld empire of Dubai could maintain its dominance quietly yet effectively, navigating both internal complexities and external pressures with skillful foresight. And so, as the night deepened over Dubai, the architects of this hidden world continued their quiet orchestration. Alliances were monitored, strategies refined, and influence subtly extended. Every action, every decision, and every gesture was calibrated to maintain balance, reinforce loyalty, and protect power. Beneath the city's glittering towers, an intricate system of control thrived, resilient, adaptable, and largely unseen. In this calm and deliberate environment, authority was exercised with subtlety, foresight, and intelligence, ensuring that the underworld empire would endure, quietly shaping outcomes and opportunities without ever revealing the full extent of its reach. With internal stability maintained and influence carefully consolidated, attention naturally shifted to the art of expansion. By this stage, the underworld figures of Dubai had mastered wealth management, network cultivation, and the subtle orchestration of power. Yet the pursuit of growth required a new level of foresight, strategy, and calculated ambition. Expansion was not simply about increasing assets or influence, it was about extending reach, reinforcing resilience, and creating new avenues for opportunity, all while maintaining the delicate balance of discretion that had protected the empire for so long. This phase demanded patience, insight, and the ability to recognize opportunity before others could perceive it. Opportunities for expansion were often subtle, appearing in the form of emerging markets, underexplored industries, or shifts in social and economic dynamics. Unlike overt ventures, these possibilities required careful observation and strategic analysis. Leaders learned to identify trends, assess potential risks and rewards, and determine how each opportunity could complement existing operations. This process involved a careful balance of timing, resources, and alliances. Acting too quickly could draw unwanted attention or expose vulnerabilities, while hesitation might allow rivals to seize the advantage. The most successful figures developed an almost instinctive sense of when to intervene and when to wait, a skill honed over years of patient observation and experience. Expansion also required the careful integration of new associates and resources. Bringing additional participants into the network was not a casual decision, every new connection needed to be assessed for reliability, discretion, and alignment with strategic objectives. Mentoring, subtle testing, and gradual inclusion allowed leaders to gauge loyalty and competence, ensuring that each addition strengthened rather than destabilized the system. Similarly, the deployment of new financial, logistical, or informational resources was meticulously planned to reinforce existing structures while opening new pathways for growth. This process highlighted the interplay of trust, timing, and subtle guidance as foundational elements of sustainable expansion. Geography played a crucial role in strategic growth. While Dubai itself provided a central hub, opportunities extended beyond its borders. Emerging trade centers, regional markets, and global financial hubs offered avenues for discrete influence, resource accumulation, and network development. Expanding into these areas required careful observation of local dynamics, cultural nuances, and regulatory landscapes. Partnerships with trusted intermediaries, aligned interests, and controlled visibility allowed operations to extend without compromising the core system. Expansion was never reckless, it was deliberate, strategic, and always designed to reinforce the stability of the empire while increasing its reach and resilience. The psychological component of expansion was equally significant. New ventures, territories, or associates introduced uncertainty, requiring both patience and strategic judgment. Leaders had to anticipate potential challenges, interpret subtle signals, and manage human behavior without overt interference. Observing reactions, guiding expectations, and shaping perception ensured that new elements integrated smoothly into the existing system. Each interaction became a calculated exercise in influence, reinforcing both authority and loyalty while maintaining discretion. Over time, these subtle adjustments strengthened the cohesion and adaptability of the expanded network. Financial strategy remained a central pillar. New investments, resources, and ventures were evaluated not only for profitability but also for their capacity to enhance resilience, influence, and operational flexibility. Diversification allowed the underworld figures to mitigate risks while seizing opportunities that aligned with long-term objectives. Subtle allocation of funds, layered transactions, and discrete investment channels ensured that expansion did not compromise security or visibility. Wealth became both a lever for growth and a shield against exposure, allowing leaders to pursue calculated ambition without threatening the stability of their existing empire. Observation and intelligence gathering were indispensable during expansion. The most effective operators maintained continuous awareness of market conditions, competitor behavior, and emerging risks. Patterns were analyzed, trends anticipated, and contingencies prepared for multiple scenarios. Knowledge of human, economic, and regulatory factors enabled precise interventions that guided expansion smoothly while maintaining discretion. In this way, intelligence was both a defensive and proactive tool, allowing leaders to act confidently even in uncertain or rapidly changing circumstances. Conflict and risk management remained intertwined with expansion. New ventures introduced the potential for disputes, competition, or unforeseen challenges. Yet confrontation was rarely overt. Through discreet negotiation, subtle mediation, and strategic problem-solving, leaders ensured that emerging conflicts were resolved before they could disrupt operations. Effective management of these situations reinforced loyalty, demonstrated competence, and preserved stability. In many cases, successfully navigating risk during expansion strengthened both authority and influence, transforming potential threats into opportunities for consolidation and growth. Cultural and social navigation played an increasingly important role. Expansion often involved engagement with new communities, business sectors, or networks. Strategic gestures, subtle social cues, and controlled interactions ensured that relationships were cultivated smoothly, trust was established discreetly, and influence could be extended without exposure. Even minor acts, attending events, offering support, or recognizing contributions, could reinforce authority and facilitate integration of new elements into the existing system. The interplay of public discretion and private control allowed expansion to occur seamlessly, without undermining the careful balance of stability and secrecy that defined the empire. Ultimately, expansion was the culmination of years of patient cultivation, strategic foresight, and mastery of human and systemic dynamics. It required a delicate equilibrium between ambition and caution, risk and reward, visibility and discretion. By carefully observing, guiding, and integrating new opportunities, associates, and territories, the underworld figures of Dubai ensured that their empire continued to grow while maintaining stability and security. Expansion was not a reckless pursuit of wealth or notoriety, it was a calculated and deliberate process, executed with patience, subtlety, and strategic intelligence, extending influence quietly yet effectively across both visible and hidden domains. And so, as Dubai's skyline gleamed beneath the night sky and the city's hum softened to a distant murmur, the hidden empire continued its silent, deliberate growth. Alliances were strengthened, resources deployed, and networks expanded with careful precision. Each decision, interaction, and investment was calibrated to reinforce stability, enhance influence, and preserve discretion. Beneath the city's opulence, the underworld moved with quiet confidence, extending its reach, consolidating its strength, and laying the foundation for continued dominance. In this calm, calculated orchestration, growth was both inevitable and sustainable, a testament to patience, insight, and the subtle mastery of opportunity. As the empire quietly expanded, the underworld figures of Dubai faced the inevitable challenge of managing the delicate balance between growth and discretion. With networks spanning multiple sectors, influence touching both visible and hidden spheres, and wealth accumulating in significant volumes, the complexity of operations had reached an unprecedented level. The city's glittering skyline masked a hidden web of power, operating silently but with profound effect. Every decision, every action, and every subtle interaction had to be measured not only for its immediate impact but also for its potential ripple across the intricate systems of human, financial, and social dynamics. In this phase, mastery was defined not merely by ambition but by restraint, foresight, and the ability to navigate the unseen currents of influence. Maintaining discretion became more critical than ever. While wealth and influence offered numerous opportunities, they also attracted attention from competitors, regulators, and curious observers. Visibility could be dangerous, and ostentation carried risk. Leaders carefully calibrated public appearances, social engagements, and business activities, ensuring that influence was extended without revealing the full scope of operations. Even minor gestures, attending a high-profile event, making a contribution, or acknowledging a contact, were strategically evaluated for their potential impact. The art of discretion required constant awareness, patience, and an understanding of human perception, ensuring that power remained effective while remaining largely invisible. The management of human networks was increasingly complex. As the empire grew, the number of individuals involved, both directly and indirectly, expanded dramatically. Each relationship represented both an asset and a potential point of vulnerability. Maintaining cohesion required subtle reinforcement of loyalty, careful monitoring of sentiment, and strategic allocation of responsibility. Leaders employed a variety of methods to sustain trust, from private acknowledgments and gestures of appreciation to structured oversight and guidance. By managing human dynamics with attention and subtlety, they ensured that the network remained stable, resilient, and capable of executing complex operations without disruption. Strategic foresight played a central role in guiding expansion. Every venture, every investment, and every relationship was evaluated in terms of both immediate benefit and long-term consequence. Leaders considered market trends, competitor behavior, regulatory developments, and social dynamics before acting. Timing was critical, an intervention too early could invite scrutiny, while hesitation could allow rivals to seize the advantage. The ability to anticipate shifts and act with precision became a hallmark of effective leadership. Each calculated move reinforced authority, strengthened networks, and extended influence without compromising the stability of the empire. Financial strategy remained at the heart of operational control. The deployment of wealth was carefully managed to serve multiple purposes, generating profit, reinforcing influence, maintaining discretion, and supporting expansion. Investments were diversified across sectors, regions, and instruments, providing both resilience and opportunity. Sophisticated financial structures allowed the movement of resources without attracting undue attention, ensuring operational flexibility while mitigating risk. Wealth became not only a measure of success but a tool for strategic orchestration, enabling leaders to extend power quietly, securely, and efficiently. Observation and intelligence gathering were indispensable during this phase. Leaders monitored emerging trends, competitor actions, regulatory changes, and human behavior with meticulous care. Patterns were interpreted, signals assessed, and contingencies prepared for a variety of scenarios. This continuous vigilance allowed for precise interventions that preserved stability while exploiting opportunity. Intelligence was both a defensive and proactive tool, allowing the underworld figures to navigate complex environments with confidence, subtlety, and foresight. Each observation informed decisions across operational, financial, and relational domains, reinforcing the resilience of the empire. Psychology and perception were central to sustaining authority. Influence was exercised not only through resources and networks but also through subtle shaping of perception. Leaders understood that human behavior could be guided through expectation, anticipation, and careful suggestion. Every interaction, from private conversations to public gestures, was an opportunity to reinforce loyalty, encourage cooperation, and subtly assert authority. The perception of competence, discretion, and omniscience became as important as any tangible asset, ensuring that influence extended far beyond direct control. By guiding perception with precision, the underworld figures maintained both credibility and freedom of action. Conflict and risk management remained continuous responsibilities. Expansion inevitably introduced new competitors, rivalries, and potential sources of disruption. Yet confrontation was rarely overt. Instead, disputes were addressed discreetly through negotiation, mediation, or subtle intervention. Leaders anticipated tensions before they escalated, transforming potential threats into opportunities for consolidation and reinforcement. Effective management of conflict reinforced loyalty, demonstrated competence, and preserved operational stability. In this way, challenges were not merely neutralized but converted into mechanisms for strengthening the empire. Cultural and social navigation became increasingly intricate as the network expanded. Engagement with new communities, markets, and business sectors required sensitivity, discretion, and strategic awareness. Subtle gestures, selective participation in events, and the cultivation of perception allowed leaders to extend influence without compromising operational security. Relationships were managed carefully, ensuring alignment of interests, loyalty, and trust. Even minor interactions could have significant ripple effects, reinforcing authority, facilitating integration of new associates, and sustaining the stability of the broader network. The ability to harmonize public perception with private strategy became a defining characteristic of effective leadership. Sustainability emerged as a guiding principle. Expansion and growth were pursued not for spectacle or immediate gratification but for long-term resilience. Each decision was assessed for its capacity to reinforce stability, preserve discretion, and create enduring influence. Leaders understood that short-term gains could be detrimental if they compromised security, networks, or reputation. By prioritizing sustainability, the underworld figures of Dubai ensured that their empire would endure the pressures of competition, regulatory scrutiny, and the unpredictable nature of human behavior. Patience, foresight, and strategic calculation became the foundation of enduring power. And so, in the quiet hours of the night, beneath the shimmering skyline of Dubai and the subtle hum of the city, the empire continued its careful orchestration. Alliances were reinforced, resources deployed, and influence extended with meticulous attention to detail. Every action, every decision, and every gesture was calibrated to maintain stability, enhance authority, and preserve discretion. Beneath the opulence and spectacle, a sophisticated and largely invisible system of control thrived, resilient and adaptive. In this environment, power was exercised quietly, strategically, and sustainably, an empire guided by patience, insight, and the subtle mastery of both opportunity and human nature. Here, in the calm of night, the underworld's delicate balance of expansion and discretion continued, quietly shaping outcomes and securing its place in the hidden fabric of the city. As the empire solidified and expanded, attention turned toward safeguarding the intricate structures that had been painstakingly built over years. With wealth, networks, and influence now deeply entrenched, the true test of the underworld figure's mastery lay in protection, both of assets and of the delicate balance that enabled operations to remain largely invisible. The complexity of the network had grown significantly, and each new connection, venture, or financial maneuver introduced potential vulnerabilities. Leaders understood that the longevity of the empire depended not only on growth but also on meticulous preservation, careful monitoring, and a keen awareness of risk. Security, discretion, and resilience became guiding principles in every decision. The management of internal networks became increasingly sophisticated. As more associates were integrated into the operations, the potential for misalignment or betrayal grew. Maintaining loyalty and cohesion required subtle yet deliberate interventions. Private conversations, discreet gestures of acknowledgement, and strategic delegation of responsibility reinforced trust and loyalty. Leaders observed behavior carefully, interpreting nuanced signals that might indicate dissatisfaction or hidden ambition. Through patience, foresight, and calculated guidance, they ensured that each individual's role strengthened rather than destabilized the collective structure. Relationships were maintained not through overt dominance, but through trust, subtle reinforcement, and the perception of fairness and competence. External threats demanded equally nuanced attention. Competitors were always observing, authorities occasionally scrutinized, and economic or political shifts could introduce unpredictability. Anticipating these challenges required both vigilance and analysis. Leaders monitored patterns, gathered intelligence discreetly, and maintained contingency plans for a range of scenarios. Risk was not simply avoided, it was understood, measured, and integrated into strategic decision-making. Each potential challenge became an opportunity to test resilience, refine strategy, and reinforce the authority of the empire. In this environment, foresight and subtle intervention were as critical as financial acumen or operational skill. Financial management continued to play a central role in protection and stability. Assets were strategically diversified, creating resilience against unforeseen disruptions. Investments were carefully structured to safeguard resources while maintaining flexibility for future opportunities. Discrete allocation of funds, layered financial instruments, and cross-border transactions allowed leaders to preserve operational freedom and shield the empire from scrutiny. Wealth was not merely a measure of power, it was a protective tool, enabling subtle influence, strategic maneuvering, and the maintenance of discretion. The careful orchestration of financial resources became a silent safeguard against exposure and instability. Observation and intelligence gathering remained indispensable. Leaders maintained constant awareness of both human behavior and broader systemic dynamics. Subtle changes in attitude, minor fluctuations in market conditions, or shifts in regulatory focus could signal emerging risks. By interpreting these signs early, interventions could be executed with precision, ensuring continuity and stability. Intelligence served both defensive and proactive functions. It allowed leaders to anticipate challenges, guide decision-making, and maintain a position of quiet authority. In a world where visibility could be dangerous, knowledge and insight became the ultimate form of protection. Psychology and perception were essential tools for safeguarding the empire. Authority was maintained not merely through control of resources or networks, but through the careful shaping of perception. Allies, associates, and rivals alike were influenced through subtle cues, expectation management, and strategic signaling. Every interaction, from private conversations to minor public gestures, was an opportunity to reinforce loyalty, inspire confidence, and ensure compliance without confrontation. By guiding perception with precision, leaders preserved operational discretion while subtly reinforcing their power, creating an environment where stability was maintained even in the absence of overt control. Conflict management remained a critical aspect of preservation. Tensions inevitably arose, whether from personal ambition, competition, or misunderstandings. Yet confrontation was rarely necessary. Discreet mediation, subtle negotiation, and strategic problem-solving allowed conflicts to be resolved before they could escalate. Addressing issues quietly reinforced credibility, demonstrated competence, and preserved the cohesion of the network. In many cases, successfully managing conflict enhanced loyalty and solidified authority, ensuring that challenges did not compromise the stability or discretion of the empire. The ability to transform potential disruptions into reinforcing mechanisms was a hallmark of sophisticated leadership. Cultural and social navigation played an increasingly nuanced role in protection. Expansion often required interaction with new communities, sectors, or markets. Discreet engagement, subtle gestures, and careful management of relationships ensured integration without exposure. Trust was cultivated gradually, alliances reinforced through small but meaningful actions, and perception managed to ensure credibility. Even minor interactions could have significant effects on network stability, loyalty, and influence. Leaders understood that the social environment was as critical as financial or operational considerations in preserving the empire's resilience. Sustainability became the guiding principle in every decision. Short-term gains or flashy maneuvers were avoided if they risked destabilizing long-term stability. Every venture, every association, and every financial allocation was assessed for its capacity to reinforce resilience and maintain discretion. Leaders understood that endurance depended on careful calibration, growing the empire while simultaneously protecting its foundations, extending influence without attracting unwanted attention, and reinforcing networks without creating dependency or vulnerability. Sustainability was not merely a goal, it was the operational philosophy that ensured the empire's quiet dominance would persist over time. Finally, the underworld figures of Dubai embraced a form of quiet mastery in preservation. Beneath the city's opulence, they moved with calm precision, monitoring networks, allocating resources, and extending influence with subtlety and discretion. Stability was maintained not through force or visibility, but through patient observation, foresight, and strategic orchestration. Each night, as the city settled into a gentle hum and the desert breeze whispered against the towers, the empire remained resilient, adaptive, and largely unseen. In this careful equilibrium, power was preserved, influence quietly reinforced, and the empire's longevity secured. The delicate art of safeguarding authority, resources, and perception had become a defining feature of leadership, ensuring that the empire could thrive amidst uncertainty while remaining hidden in plain sight. As the empire of Dubai's underworld matured, the focus shifted from mere maintenance to the refinement of influence and authority. By this stage, the network was vast, wealth substantial, and operations sophisticated, yet the challenge was no longer only growth or consolidation, it was the subtle, ongoing refinement of control itself. The underworld figures had come to understand that true power was not demonstrated through spectacle or overt dominance, but through a combination of subtle orchestration, strategic foresight, and careful calibration of perception. Each decision, each interaction, and each maneuver had to be evaluated not only for its immediate outcome but for its long-term effect on influence, stability, and discretion. Refinement of influence required a careful study of human behavior. Leaders had learned that authority could be extended without direct intervention, simply by shaping perception, expectation, and environment. Observing the motivations, desires, and fears of associates and rivals allowed subtle guidance of decisions and actions. Minor gestures, well-timed advice, or discreet validation of loyalty could reinforce networks in ways that overt control could never achieve. In this way, the underworld figures maintained a presence that was powerful yet largely invisible, guiding outcomes with a combination of psychological acumen, patience, and strategic insight. At the same time, operational precision became increasingly important. The larger the empire, the more intricate the coordination required to maintain smooth functioning. Financial operations, logistical channels, and interpersonal networks had to operate in harmony, each element reinforcing the others. Small errors could cascade into larger disruptions if not addressed proactively. Leaders implemented systems for careful observation, subtle monitoring, and controlled intervention. By orchestrating complex operations with discretion, they ensured that the empire continued to function seamlessly, maintaining both efficiency and invisibility. Risk assessment and management were refined to a near-scientific level. With operations now spanning multiple domains, potential vulnerabilities had multiplied, from market fluctuations and regulatory scrutiny to shifts in alliances and human behavior. Each risk was carefully evaluated, with contingencies prepared for a variety of scenarios. Leaders understood that flexibility and adaptability were critical. The ability to pivot quickly without compromising stability allowed the empire to navigate uncertainty with confidence. Risk was no longer merely an obstacle, it was a variable to be understood, anticipated, and integrated into the broader strategy of influence and control. Financial strategy continued to evolve alongside operational refinement. Wealth was deployed not only to generate profit, but also to extend influence, preserve discretion, and reinforce alliances. Investments were structured for flexibility, liquidity, and resilience, allowing resources to be reallocated as circumstances changed. Sophisticated financial instruments, layered transactions, and cross-border management ensured both efficiency and security. Money became a tool not only for expansion but for the subtle reinforcement of authority and stability, allowing leaders to shape outcomes without direct confrontation or exposure. Observation and intelligence remained cornerstones of refined control. Leaders continuously monitored both human behavior and systemic conditions, interpreting subtle shifts in attitudes, behaviors, and market signals. Every observation informed decision-making, whether regarding financial allocation, network reinforcement, or strategic intervention. Intelligence gathering was both proactive and defensive, allowing leaders to anticipate threats, exploit opportunities, and guide the empire's evolution with precision. Knowledge, in this context, became a form of invisible leverage, extending influence far beyond the immediate sphere of control. Psychology and perception played a central role in refinement. Authority was exercised as much through subtle influence as through tangible control. Each interaction, whether a conversation, a gesture, or an acknowledgement, was an opportunity to reinforce loyalty, shape expectations, or subtly guide behavior. Leaders understood that human perception could be gently directed, aligning actions and attitudes with the broader objectives of the empire. By managing how they were perceived, underworld figures maintained both freedom of action and the credibility necessary to execute complex strategies with minimal interference. Conflict management at this stage was equally sophisticated. Tensions and disputes were inevitable in a vast network of operations and alliances. Yet rather than confronting challenges overtly, leaders relied on subtle negotiation, discreet mediation, and calculated influence. Potential disputes were anticipated and addressed before they could escalate, turning risk into an opportunity to reinforce loyalty and authority. The art of conflict management became an integral part of the empire's operational fabric, ensuring that stability and cohesion were preserved while relationships were strengthened through skillful resolution. Cultural and social navigation became increasingly nuanced as influence refined. Engagement with new communities, markets, and social spheres required careful attention to norms, perceptions, and expectations. Subtle gestures, strategic presence, and measured interaction allowed leaders to extend authority and cultivate trust without attracting undue attention. Every engagement, no matter how minor, was assessed for its potential to reinforce stability, facilitate integration, and sustain influence. This delicate orchestration ensured that the empire remained resilient and adaptable, capable of extending reach without jeopardizing discretion or cohesion. Sustainability and foresight remained guiding principles. The empire's long-term viability depended on the careful balance of expansion, control, and discretion. Leaders focused on the gradual refinement of systems, the continuous monitoring of networks, and the strategic cultivation of influence. Short-term gains were tempered by the imperatives of long-term resilience, and every decision was evaluated through the lens of enduring stability. Patience, observation, and strategic foresight were not merely operational strategies, they were the philosophy through which the empire maintained both discretion and dominance. And so, in the quiet of the night, beneath the shimmering towers of Dubai and the gentle hum of the city, the empire continued to evolve with subtlety and precision. Influence was refined, networks carefully monitored, and resources strategically deployed. Every gesture, every decision, and every intervention was calibrated to reinforce authority, preserve discretion, and extend control. Beneath the glittering skyline, a sophisticated, largely invisible system of power persisted, resilient, adaptive, and meticulously orchestrated. In this calm, deliberate environment, authority was both preserved and perfected, ensuring that the underworld empire of Dubai remained unchallenged, quietly shaping outcomes with patience, foresight, and mastery of human, financial, and social dynamics. As the underworld empire matured, the focus increasingly shifted toward the consolidation of legacy. By this stage, the leaders had achieved extraordinary influence, wealth, and operational mastery, yet the question of enduring presence became paramount. Expansion, refinement, and protection had created a powerful network, but the ultimate measure of success lay in ensuring that their influence would persist even beyond their active involvement. This stage demanded a combination of foresight, strategic delegation, and the subtle embedding of authority into the very fabric of the operations. Leaders understood that a lasting empire was not maintained solely by presence but by the careful cultivation of systems, relationships, and perceptions that could operate independently, guided by principles they had instilled. Institutionalizing influence became a central task. The networks, once maintained through personal oversight and discretion, needed to function autonomously while remaining aligned with the overarching objectives of the empire. Trusted lieutenants, intermediaries, and associates were carefully mentored, gradually taking on responsibilities while being subtly guided to adhere to established norms. Systems of accountability, loyalty, and operational protocols were embedded to ensure stability. The leader's goal was to create an environment in which their authority was reflected not only in direct decisions but in the ongoing behavior, choices, and actions of those within the network. In this way, influence extended beyond immediate control and became a self-sustaining force. Strategic succession planning emerged as a subtle but critical component of legacy. Identifying individuals capable of sustaining the empire's delicate balance required careful observation, assessment, and mentoring over time. Leaders looked for qualities such as discretion, intelligence, foresight, and the ability to navigate complex social and financial landscapes. Potential successors were gradually exposed to responsibilities, tested through controlled challenges, and subtly guided to internalize the principles of operational excellence. By ensuring that knowledge, judgment, and authority were transferred deliberately, the empire could continue to thrive even as direct oversight diminished, preserving stability and continuity across generations of leadership. Maintaining discretion became even more essential as the empire's visibility inevitably increased with its success. Public awareness, scrutiny from competitors, and regulatory interest all posed potential risks to long-term continuity. Leaders continued to cultivate a careful balance between presence and invisibility, ensuring that authority was recognized without exposing vulnerabilities. Strategic communication, selective engagement, and subtle signaling allowed influence to persist while protecting the integrity of operations. The art of discretion evolved into a cornerstone of legacy, demonstrating that enduring power could be exercised quietly, without the need for spectacle or overt demonstration. Financial stewardship played a critical role in securing the future. Wealth was not only preserved but strategically allocated to reinforce operational stability and ensure ongoing influence. Investments were structured to provide resilience, liquidity, and flexibility, allowing the empire to adapt to changing circumstances without destabilizing core operations. Financial resources became instruments of continuity, capable of supporting key alliances, sustaining critical infrastructure, and reinforcing loyalty across networks. By embedding financial stability into the architecture of the empire, leaders ensured that influence could endure even as active involvement waned. Observation and intelligence remained indispensable in securing legacy. Even as systems were institutionalized, continuous monitoring of human behavior, market trends, and regulatory shifts allowed leaders to anticipate challenges and guide responses proactively. Subtle interventions, informed by careful analysis, ensured that the network remained aligned, resilient, and capable of weathering disruptions. Intelligence became not merely a tool for immediate control but a mechanism for embedding foresight and adaptability into the operations themselves, reinforcing the empire's capacity for self-sustaining influence. Psychology and perception continued to shape authority. Leaders understood that legacy was as much about perception as it was about tangible assets. The cultivation of credibility, respect, and trust ensured that influence endured in the minds and actions of associates, partners, and rivals alike. Even minor interactions could reinforce loyalty or subtly correct deviations from established norms. By guiding perception with precision, the underworld figures ensured that their principles and authority were internalized across networks, creating a culture of alignment and compliance that would outlast their direct oversight. Conflict management became an embedded principle within the network. Anticipating disputes, rivalries, and challenges, leaders implemented protocols and mentorship systems to resolve potential conflicts discreetly and effectively. By instilling principles of mediation, negotiation, and strategic foresight within key associates, disputes were addressed before they escalated, ensuring continuity and cohesion. Conflict management, in this context, was not reactive but institutionalized, allowing the empire to maintain stability autonomously while reinforcing the authority of the guiding principles. Cultural and social navigation also contributed to the endurance of influence. Leaders carefully embedded understanding of norms, expectations, and relational subtleties into the training and guidance of their associates. Strategic social interactions, subtle signaling, and carefully managed alliances ensured that influence could extend seamlessly across communities, sectors, and regions. By embedding these practices, the leaders created an environment in which the network could operate effectively, extending power quietly while remaining adaptable to shifting circumstances. Influence became woven into the social and operational fabric, capable of self-sustaining expansion and resilience. Ultimately, the consolidation of legacy represented the culmination of years of strategic mastery. Expansion, refinement, protection, and subtle orchestration had transformed the empire into a resilient and largely invisible force. By institutionalizing influence, cultivating succession, embedding discretion, and guiding perception, the underworld figures ensured that their authority could endure beyond direct oversight. The empire had evolved from a collection of wealth and alliances into a living, self-sustaining system, capable of navigating complexity and uncertainty while maintaining stability and discretion. And so, as Dubai's skyline shimmered beneath the night sky and the city's hum softened to a gentle murmur, the underworld's leaders quietly laid the foundation for enduring influence. Networks continued to operate seamlessly, wealth remained strategically allocated, and authority was reflected in the decisions and behaviors of trusted associates. Every intervention, observation, and strategic placement reinforced continuity, preparing the empire to thrive even in the absence of direct oversight. Beneath the glittering towers, in the calm of night, a legacy was being quietly cemented, an enduring system of power, influence, and discretion, poised to persist across time, subtle yet unyielding, hidden in plain sight yet profoundly present in every facet of the empire it had quietly built. With legacy consolidation underway, the focus of the empire shifted toward the subtle management of influence across a broader horizon. By this stage, the underworld figures had established wealth, networks, and operational systems that were remarkably resilient, yet the challenge now was to ensure their authority remained adaptive, enduring, and quietly omnipresent. Expansion and refinement had created a sophisticated infrastructure, but sustaining dominance required a delicate calibration of perception, discretion, and strategic foresight. Leaders understood that influence, like water, needed to flow seamlessly, sometimes overt, sometimes invisible, adjusting naturally to obstacles while shaping outcomes with patient precision. The management of human networks became increasingly nuanced. The empire was no longer a collection of isolated associates, it had evolved into an intricate lattice of relationships spanning multiple sectors, geographies, and spheres of influence. Each individual, each connection, was a potential node of strength or vulnerability. Leaders exercised subtle guidance, mentoring, and observation to ensure cohesion, loyalty, and alignment with overarching objectives. Discretion and patience were vital. Even minor signals of discontent or hesitation were addressed quietly, reinforcing trust and preventing disruptions. Authority was maintained not through coercion but through influence carefully embedded in the behaviors, expectations, and perceptions of those within the network. Operational precision remained central to sustaining power. As the empire's reach extended, coordination became increasingly complex. Financial flows, logistical networks, and human interactions had to operate in harmony. Small missteps could cascade into larger disturbances, so leaders implemented systems for monitoring, assessment, and controlled intervention. Each adjustment was executed with subtlety, ensuring continuity and efficiency without attracting attention. The empire's resilience depended on this orchestration, invisible, deliberate, and meticulously calibrated to withstand internal and external pressures while maintaining the seamless extension of influence. Financial management evolved further, balancing growth, stability, and discretion. Resources were allocated strategically to reinforce influence, preserve operational security, and provide flexibility for emergent opportunities. Wealth was deployed across multiple channels, both visible and discreet, ensuring liquidity, protection, and the capacity to support alliances and networks. Each financial decision was measured not only for immediate profitability but also for its long-term contribution to the empire's adaptability and endurance. Wealth became an instrument of subtle authority, capable of shaping behavior, facilitating integration, and reinforcing loyalty without overt assertion. Observation and intelligence gathering remained the backbone of strategic oversight. Leaders monitored both human and systemic dynamics, interpreting patterns in behavior, market movements, and regulatory shifts. This continuous awareness allowed for proactive adjustments, ensuring that the empire remained aligned, resilient, and capable of seizing opportunities while mitigating risks. Intelligence was integrated seamlessly into decision-making, informing subtle interventions that reinforced cohesion, preserved discretion, and enhanced authority. Knowledge, in this context, became both shield and lever, an invisible tool extending influence far beyond direct engagement. Psychology and perception were central to sustaining dominance. Leaders understood that influence could be quietly guided through expectation, suggestion, and subtle reinforcement. Small gestures, carefully timed advice, and nuanced interactions shaped loyalty, behavior, and compliance without the need for overt direction. The perception of competence, foresight, and reliability extended authority across the network, embedding trust and alignment into the very fabric of the empire. By influencing perception with precision, leaders ensured that their power remained effective, enduring, and largely invisible, quietly shaping outcomes in every domain of operation. Conflict management remained a subtle, strategic art. The complexity of the network inevitably produced rivalries, disputes, and potential tensions. Rather than relying on confrontation, leaders employed discreet negotiation, indirect mediation, and calculated guidance to resolve issues before they escalated. Potential disruptions were preemptively addressed, often converting challenges into opportunities for reinforcement of loyalty, alignment, and operational coherence. Conflict management became a system embedded within the empire's structure, allowing the network to maintain stability autonomously while reflecting the authority and foresight of its leaders. Cultural and social navigation was increasingly essential to sustaining influence. Expansion across sectors, communities, and regions required careful understanding of norms, expectations, and relational subtleties. Strategic engagement, subtle gestures, and measured interactions reinforced trust, facilitated integration, and extended authority without drawing attention. Every encounter, every acknowledgement, and every carefully managed relationship became an opportunity to strengthen alignment and cohesion. Through these methods, influence was seamlessly woven into the social and operational fabric, extending reach while preserving the discretion and integrity of the empire. Sustainability and resilience were guiding principles in every strategic decision. Leaders focused on long-term stability, carefully balancing the demands of expansion with the imperatives of discretion and cohesion. Short-term gains were weighed against potential disruptions to networks, human dynamics, and perception. Every action was assessed for its contribution to enduring influence, ensuring that the empire could adapt to changes in market conditions, competition, or societal shifts without compromising core principles. Patience, foresight, and deliberate orchestration became the hallmarks of sustainable authority, allowing the empire to thrive quietly yet effectively. Finally, the refinement of influence was not limited to immediate control. It was the quiet embedding of enduring power across all facets of the empire. Authority became self-sustaining, reflected in the behavior, decisions, and expectations of associates, partners, and networks. Subtle systems, cultural norms, and strategic oversight ensured continuity even in the absence of direct intervention. Beneath Dubai's glittering skyline, the underworld thrived invisibly, a resilient, adaptive system guided by intelligence, discretion, and subtle orchestration. In this calm, deliberate environment, influence flowed seamlessly, shaping outcomes with patience and precision, quietly extending power and embedding legacy without spectacle or exposure. As the city settled under the night sky and the desert breeze whispered across its towers, the empire remained a force both unseen and omnipresent. Networks operated seamlessly, wealth was strategically deployed, and authority was reflected in the aligned behavior of trusted associates. Every observation, intervention, and gesture reinforced stability, enhanced influence, and preserved discretion. Beneath the glittering lights, a sophisticated, largely invisible system of power endured, adaptive, resilient, and quietly commanding. Here, in the gentle calm of night, the underworld's influence persisted, a testament to patience, foresight, and the subtle mastery of human, financial, and social dynamics, quietly shaping outcomes across the city without ever revealing the full extent of its reach. As the underworld empire of Dubai approached the pinnacle of its influence, the focus naturally shifted toward the complexities of maintaining control at a scale that few could comprehend. By now, the network had evolved into a vast, multi-layered system encompassing finance, logistics, human relationships, and subtle political leverage. Its leaders had amassed wealth, extended influence, and perfected the art of discretion, yet the challenge was no longer merely operational, it was existential. How could an empire remain stable when it had become so large, interconnected, and visible, yet still largely hidden? The answer lay in a combination of foresight, systemic management, and the quiet orchestration of human, financial, and social dynamics, a delicate balance that required near constant vigilance and an almost intuitive understanding of the forces at play. The first element of sustaining such an extensive empire was the continuous reinforcement of internal networks. By this stage, the underworld was no longer controlled solely through direct oversight. Instead, influence was embedded into the very structure of the network, allowing trusted lieutenants, intermediaries, and key associates to execute operations while adhering to established norms. Leadership was exercised subtly, guiding rather than dictating, shaping behavior through expectation, example, and the careful calibration of authority. Each associate knew their role, understood their responsibilities, and operated within a system designed to reinforce loyalty and prevent deviation. In this way, the empire's internal cohesion became self-sustaining, capable of functioning effectively even when the leaders were not directly involved in every decision. Yet even with these systems in place, the potential for disruption remained. Human behavior, by its nature, is unpredictable. Ambition, resentment, and opportunity could give rise to challenges, and miscalculations, even minor ones, could ripple through the network. Leaders addressed these risks through continuous observation and subtle interventions. By monitoring communication patterns, financial decisions, and interpersonal dynamics, they could detect early signs of tension or deviation. Discreet conversations, carefully placed guidance, or minor recalibrations of responsibility ensured that potential conflicts were neutralized before they escalated. The empire's stability depended as much on anticipation and subtle intervention as it did on direct control, and the ability to act preemptively became a defining characteristic of mastery at this level. Financial control remained central to both influence and security. The wealth accumulated over years was carefully structured, diversified, and deployed across multiple channels. Investments were designed not only to generate profit but to reinforce alliances, protect discretion, and enable flexibility. Strategic allocation of resources ensured that the empire could respond to unexpected challenges, exploit new opportunities, and maintain operational continuity under a variety of conditions. Complex financial networks, layered transactions, and cross-border arrangements allowed the movement of resources with minimal visibility, ensuring that the power derived from wealth could be exercised quietly, efficiently, and effectively. Wealth was more than currency, it was a lever, a shield, and a mechanism of influence, woven into the very fabric of the empire. Observation and intelligence gathering became even more sophisticated. Leaders employed a combination of direct insight, human intelligence, and analysis of systemic patterns to understand the shifting landscape. Market fluctuations, competitor movements, political developments, and social trends were all monitored, interpreted, and integrated into decision-making. Each observation informed interventions, guided resource allocation, and refined strategy. Knowledge became both a defensive and proactive instrument, allowing the empire to adapt to changing circumstances while preserving the continuity of operations. In this environment, intelligence was not merely about understanding the present, it was about anticipating the future and shaping it quietly, subtly, and with precision. Psychology and perception remained powerful tools of control. Leaders understood that influence extended far beyond tangible assets, it permeated the minds and behavior of associates, rivals, and external stakeholders. By shaping perception, they could guide decision-making, reinforce loyalty, and subtly dictate the flow of activity without overt interference. Small gestures, well-timed advice, and strategic signaling could align networks, influence behavior, and maintain cohesion. The perception of competence, foresight, and discretion created a culture in which authority was respected, compliance was intuitive, and deviation from established norms was rare. In this way, the underworld's power was exercised as much through subtle mental influence as through financial or operational control. Conflict, whether internal or external, was managed with foresight and subtlety. The scale of the empire inevitably gave rise to rivalries, tensions, and unforeseen challenges. However, direct confrontation was rarely necessary. Instead, disputes were addressed quietly, through negotiation, discreet intervention, or subtle recalibration of responsibility. The goal was to resolve conflicts before they became threats, preserving cohesion while reinforcing loyalty. By embedding conflict resolution into the structure and culture of the network, leaders ensured that the empire could operate smoothly even under pressure, maintaining authority without overt displays of force. Each resolved challenge further strengthened the perception of competence, reliability, and subtle omnipresence, reinforcing the quiet power that governed the network. Cultural and social navigation played an increasingly nuanced role. The empire's influence extended across communities, sectors, and regions, each with its own norms, expectations, and sensitivities. Leaders cultivated an acute awareness of these subtleties, engaging strategically to reinforce loyalty, trust, and alignment. Social gestures, alliances, and interactions were carefully orchestrated to maintain discretion while enhancing authority. Even minor social cues, acknowledgements, introductions, or presence at events, were leveraged to reinforce alignment and trust across the network. The underworld's influence thus extended seamlessly into the social fabric, creating a network of compliance, loyalty, and adaptability that was as invisible as it was powerful. Sustainability was paramount in this phase. The empire was no longer focused on rapid expansion, it was concerned with maintaining influence, resilience, and adaptability over the long term. Leaders prioritized actions that reinforced structural integrity, preserved discretion, and maintained the alignment of human, financial, and operational networks. Short-term gains that threatened cohesion or exposed vulnerability were avoided. Instead, patience, strategic calculation, and foresight guided every decision, ensuring that the empire could withstand unforeseen challenges while remaining largely invisible. Sustainability became a philosophy as much as a practice, governing the empire's approach to influence, risk, and legacy. At this stage, refinement of operational systems also became critical. Processes that had been effective during growth and consolidation were analyzed, optimized, and codified. Standard operating procedures, mentorship systems, and subtle governance mechanisms were embedded to ensure consistency, reduce errors, and enable autonomous operation. The empire was effectively self-regulating, with checks, balances, and feedback mechanisms that maintained stability and efficiency. Leaders continued to intervene subtly, but the architecture of the empire allowed operations to function smoothly with minimal direct oversight, reinforcing the invisibility and resilience of influence. Finally, the consolidation of dominance required a balance of visibility and discretion. While the empire's reach was extensive, its success depended on the ability to remain largely unnoticed by those outside the network. Strategic discretion ensured that influence could be exercised quietly, without attracting attention or scrutiny that might destabilize operations. Leaders calibrated engagement, visibility, and signaling with meticulous care, ensuring that the empire's authority was respected, its power felt, yet largely unseen. This delicate equilibrium allowed the underworld to operate at maximum effectiveness, extending influence and shaping outcomes across the city while preserving the secrecy essential to its survival. As Dubai's skyline shimmered under the desert night, the empire thrived in silence. Networks moved seamlessly, wealth flowed strategically, and authority was reflected in the aligned actions and decisions of associates. Observations, subtle interventions, and careful orchestration ensured cohesion, stability, and adaptability. Beneath the city's glittering exterior, the underworld persisted, resilient, adaptive, and invisible. In the calm of night, influence flowed quietly yet powerfully, a testament to foresight, subtle mastery, and the artful orchestration of human, financial, and social dynamics. Here, at the zenith of control, the empire stood poised, secure, enduring, and profoundly hidden, quietly shaping the present and future without revealing the full scope of its reach. As the story of Dubai's hidden empire draws to a close, the city rests beneath a haze of golden light, its towers rising like silent sentinels over the desert. The underworld that once moved in whispers and shadows has become something else entirely, an invisible system of wealth, influence, and quiet continuity. Power here does not roar, it hums softly beneath the rhythm of everyday life. Its presence can be felt in small gestures, in subtle alignments, and in the silent obedience of those who understand the order of things. What began as scattered ventures, as ambition hidden behind commerce and luxury, has evolved into a form of control that requires no recognition. Its architects understood that visibility invites destruction, while invisibility ensures endurance. Their greatest achievement was not in creating wealth, but in designing a structure that could operate indefinitely without revealing itself. The Dubai underworld had become an ecosystem, self-regulating, deeply integrated, and remarkably stable, feeding quietly from the city's own pulse. For those within it, legacy was never about monuments or headlines. It was about permanence, creating a network that could outlive names and faces. The older generation mentored the younger, teaching them the art of balance, how to move money without leaving trails, how to build loyalty without promises, and how to hold power without appearing to chase it. Each successor learned that patience was the sharpest weapon, and that true authority resided not in command, but in quiet expectation. Wealth continued to flow, but it was no longer merely profit. It became a language, an unspoken code used to signal trust, loyalty, and intention. A well-timed investment, a silent partnership, a discreet favor, all were part of the orchestration that kept the empire alive. The more invisible it became, the stronger it grew. Every transaction, every alliance, every whisper of negotiation strengthened the invisible web binding the city together. Observation remained the lifeblood of this invisible governance. The leaders no longer needed to be seen, their eyes were everywhere, embedded in systems, people, and patterns. Markets, behaviors, and rumors were all threads feeding into their understanding of control. The empire adjusted constantly, never clinging to a single strategy, always reshaping itself to the rhythm of change. It survived because it listened, silently, continuously, to the hum of the city it had mastered. Even conflict, when it appeared, was handled like an art form. There were no grand confrontations, no loud reprisals. Instead, problems dissolved through quiet negotiation, repositioning, or simple disappearance. Enemies were not crushed, they were absorbed, redirected, or silenced by opportunity. In this world, peace was not the absence of conflict but the mastery of it, shaped by those who knew how to bend human ambition to their will. And through it all, Dubai itself became a reflection of this paradox. A city that shone with modernity and wealth, yet beneath the surface, operated on timeless principles of discretion, trust, and unseen hierarchy. Every glowing tower, every luxury suite, every deal signed beneath the hum of air conditioning carried traces of that unseen influence. The underworld had not just survived within the city, it had become part of its structure, a quiet partner in its rise. As the desert night deepens and the wind sweeps softly through the streets, the empire remains still. Its heartbeat echoes not in violence or chaos, but in quiet continuation, the hum of engines, the flow of transactions, the silent trust between those who understand the code. No headlines will ever tell its full story. No courtroom will ever reveal its architecture. And yet, its influence endures, measured in silence, discretion, and the calm precision of those who have mastered the art of remaining unseen. Power here is not loud, it is patient. It does not command attention, it shapes it. The Dubai Mafia, the billionaires of the hidden underworld, did not merely build an empire. They built a rhythm, a system of quiet dominance that moves beneath the surface of the city, unseen yet undeniable. And as Dubai sleeps under the silver glow of its skyline, that quiet rhythm continues, timeless and unbroken, whispering through the sands that some empires are not meant to be seen, only felt.